listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away.
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joined will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing all the movies that came out in 2018 across all the platforms that we're aware of. Now,
Every single movie we saw.
every single film that exists. Now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we'll probably miss, especially indie stuff.
Yeah.
Well, just like we were talking pre-podcast, it's like there's so much stuff that like even if you like write it down, like you're still going to forget some. We even forgot like Black Panther came out this year, which is a huge release, and we all liked it. But just this year, I think more so than almost any years I remember, is just so much
Well,
stuff.
and two, some of the stuff is hard to keep track of because especially with independent stuff, there'll be an indie horror film that goes to Film Fest in 2016 and 17 that gets a digital release in 2018. And if you're not keeping track of that, it's like, well, is it a 2016 movie, 2017, 2018? And then some of that stuff, it's just these movies aren't super promoted.
Yeah.
So if something doesn't go to Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, or Shudder, but it just gets like a video on demand and like disc release, some of that stuff may be pretty hard to come by because like a site like bigger horror sites like Bloody Disgusting or iHorror, Dread Central or whatever may have been in a festival and talked about it in 2017.
Yeah.
Just like in their coverage, and then you forget about it.
And then like some of the movies you talk about too, even though they came out this year, they've came out in January, February, March, and that honestly at this point
feels like a long time
2
ago.
years ago. So you're like, oh, they did come out, because it's 2019 now, but in 18, it's like, it almost feels like it was 2 years ago.
So we'll go through and touch.
long year.
We'll go through and touch on all the major releases that we tried to scour to make sure we were covering stuff that everything we talked about, and then other big stuff that we may have not seen, but that was generally stuff that got some discussion. And then depending on how the time goes, and we're also going to do like some of our top fives and awards for the year, and then look forward to 2019. That might be a second episode depending on how we're going on time.
So basically, if you listen to this and you just care about the horror releases this year, you can skip all the other podcasts from this year because we're going to do a rundown. Two-sentence rundown.
Yeah.
No, yeah, like
Good,
a quick,
bad.
a quick
Good,
rundown on our thoughts. And two, your thoughts change over time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you've rewatched something, if you thought on, like, a lot of times sometimes I go both ways, like
Pick a lane.
we can talk about some and how I've maybe even soured more on some stuff, but some stuff you watch and you think, oh wait, actually I love that, or so.
Yeah, so what we'll do now is we will go through by month, like the theatrical releases we're aware of, and then we'll also touch on the stuff that came out that were TV shows and the stuff that came out on streaming services exclusively.
This is an exact science, and there's no way we made any errors at all.
Yeah, so
and I did not pull this list from Movie Web or something.
Yeah.
And just categorize by horror.
This is not the Spark
Wink.
Notes version.
Wink.
Yeah.
Are you saying wink?
And this
You
is to
idiot.
remind us because, again, it's so much stuff.
Well, because, like I said, so just kind of going through, there's movies that we saw that I kind of forgot about. So starting off, so in terms of the horror movies, like the big notable ones that came out in January of 2018, so there was Day of the Dead Bloodline.
Which I watched. You guys didn't see that, did you?
No.
I watched it on Netflix because I was so curious. Like, please, if any, the bar was so low
With that
because
last
other
one.
remake. Did you guys see the other remake?
That was the one that had Ving Rhames as like the cousin of his character from Dawn of the Dead or something.
Yeah,
and
and
there
so
was
they-
the vegan or something. When he
And
turned
it
into
was like there was a
zombie.
DJ. Some of it, I love Day of the Dead.
The Romero.
I think this one was actually set in a military type of bunker. Thankfully, not that they can't take liberties, but the other one, I remember it being centered around a radio station and a DJ booth, but it was also kind of in the city a little bit, and the zombies crawled on the ceiling like spiders. That was the weirdest choice. That last one with and Mina
Suvari.
Suvari, man, her and Ving Rhames are good, but that movie was not. And this was not as offensively bad as far as, in comparison to that original film.
Well, I think there's also probably the fact of the separation of time because Dawn of the Dead and all that stuff had came out closer to when that Day of the Dead remake came out. So this being 10 years after all that stuff, for the most part,
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't
separates it from having those expectations.
so awful, but it was very forgettable and just you know,
'cause-
again, it had a low bar to cross and it crossed it, but not like it leaped over it by a great deal.
Well, because like too, like those, you had Dawn of the Dead, you had 28 Days Later and Weeks Later and Shaun of the Dead, so all that kind of zombie revitalization. So when you're making a Day of the Dead movie and they get Ving Rhames back and they get Mina Suvari, who while not a huge box office draw was in decent movies and was a good actress, you're like, oh, okay,
Academy Award-winning films.
But then yeah, American Beauty. So did you see apparently Kevin Spacey did some other weird stuff recently where he delivered a pizza to paparazzi wearing a hat that said I retired in 2017 or something?
Yes.
I think he's gone off the deep end. Or maybe it's a Shia LaBeouf or Joaquin Phoenix like performance art thing.
But the bad thing is, like, knowing what he's done, it's not funny because it's like, if it's like Shia LaBeouf or
It's not Joaquin Phoenix
Joaquin would be different.
putting gum on the table at Letterman and trying to rap.
Whatever.
It's
So something better than Kevin Spacey, Day of the Dead Bloodline.
yeah.
Not the worst thing in the world. They're going to remake those Romero films. They're going to keep remaking them. So I'm always curious because that's like one of my favorite series of all time. So, you could do worse, but it definitely is far away from even, the Dawn remake, which a lot of people like and I like as well. But yeah.
Let's see. Then other movies that came out. So we have Insidious: The Last Key, and Derek and I both saw that.
And I think maybe both of us probably agreed with on that was it was just underwhelming coming off of the third one, which was one of our, I think whatever year it came out, which was probably 16. It was the horror movie of the year. That one was just very well. It came out at like a series high. Then you got this one, which at the end of the day I don't think was a bad horror movie. And it did have some accolades. I think it made the most money ever with a leading woman over a certain age. So
Before Halloween came out, probably. Or I guess she's probably older.
she was older.
Yeah,
so I think it was still for her age. It was like the old.
Was Lynch? No, Lynn Shay was in Nightmare 4 or something like that, right?
Well, she was in. Wasn't she in the first one as a teacher?
That's what I was wondering. Was she in the first Halloween, right?
No, she wasn't in Halloween.
Okay, the first Nightmare.
She was in the
then,
first
right?
Nightmare as a teacher at the
But
school.
I think for her age, whatever it was like one of the highest grossing. It maybe got beat by Halloween. I can't remember. But anyway, while it wasn't like a bad movie, it just kind of came out underwhelming because it was such at a high. And then this movie to me kind of took all the elements that they did effectively from the third and just kind of dropped it.
and
Is it still worth watching?
If you're a fan of the franchise, I think it is, and I think because Lynn Shay is just so good that like even though the plot and the story wasn't the best, she's still so damn good in these movies, and it is kind of cool to see like a character like her be like a series seller. Like people want to see it because of her.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see her because if you remember correctly, like big movies and Something About Mary, she was in there as like the neighbor that was all wrinkled up sunbathing or something.
Yeah.
So to see her going from playing these kind of bit roles and stuff to being the lead in a franchise that's making good money, that's awesome.
Timeline wise, so the third one was a prequel set way before the first one.
Yeah, this one is like the events right before the first Insidious.
Okay.
So like at the end of this movie, you even see events that set up kind of the first movie.
Yeah.
And then this one, I think when it ends, like is right around the time. So I don't think there could be a 5.
I love when series have to do backflips to keep using certain characters or whatever.
Yeah, because they kind of put themselves into a wall.
It's like Fast and Furious 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think, were set before Tokyo Drift, which came out in like 2008 or something. Okay, let's see.
Because just real quick, even though that movie we didn't think it was I don't think we were too hot on it. It's still made on a budget of $10 million and made 167. So it still did pretty well at the box
Enough
office.
that they could try to find a way to make that franchise keep going on. I mean, so it's one of those movies where at the end of the year, I kind of forgotten about it. If it was on streaming, I might watch it again. But it's definitely not something I would say people have to go out and watch. It's funny too because we were big on the third one.
Yeah, third one
it's
was
chapter
awesome.
3. But I've seen a lot of people that kind of poop on it and say, "Oh, well, the third." I think a lot of people just either didn't watch it or dismissed it so much going in.
A lot of people really love those first two, something about them. And for me,
I think
I thought they were fine, but I didn't,
I think a lot of people love the first one.
Yeah.
And then tolerate the second one. And then just kind of like when Patrick Wilson and that group wasn't in the rest of the movies, it was just Lynn Shay. They're like,
Rose Byrne.
Yeah, Rose Byrne, and so kind of big name people now. Because both Patrick Wilson is in Aquaman. Rose Byrne was in she was in X-Men, the first one of that reboot series.
She's very. I mean, she's Neighbors. I know.
Yeah,
whatever.
the
It's
Neighbors
comedy, but she's
movies
so
and-
great in those.
But real quick, like as far as actual release for Insidious, and 4 made the most of all of them. Now it was on budget $10 million, but like, so it's still, as far as they're probably gonna make another one some way, because when you're making money that much off of a $10 million movie.
I mean, it'd be weird
Is that
if
a Blumhouse or is that Warner?
I think Blumhouse may be producing them.
Yes, that's Blumhouse. Now The Conjuring is.
Yeah, so it'd be weird if they have so you have Insidious 1 and 2, which are like kind of the
They're direct-
prime timeline, and then you have 3 and 4, which happened before 1 and 2, and if they were to make a 5 that happens after 2, then that'd be really confusing for people. But yeah, and then
They're just going to retcon it and say only the first one happened.
Only 3 and 4 happened. They're going to remake the first one,
or they can just make a new movie where it's just all about somebody's dreams, because what's way more entertaining than having your own dreams? Hearing about someone else's.
Yeah. What if they just retconned the first movie, rebooted it with the 5th, and so they rebooted a movie that just came out in 2010 that just
It wouldn't be the first time.
So we should make a new short film series where it's just about dreams and astral projection, and it'll be really entertaining. Let's see. So other movies that came out in January, A Demon Within. I didn't see that. So none of us saw that.
Nope.
And then there was a remake of Inside.
I guess. I'm not for sure.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
I've always wanted to watch Inside. I almost bought it. It was those Digital Extremes releases.
Yeah.
Heard great things about it. And then I happened to just see, again, I saw kind of just some thumbnails on some of these. So didn't hear any buzz about it. So I'm guessing that was one that people weren't hot on or they just missed.
Yeah, and then Mom and Dad. So Mom and Dad was a movie that had, I think, prior to being released in January, had done the festival circuit in 2017, because I remember hearing about it. There's Nick Cage, Selma Blair, kind of just, it's directed by, it was one of the Neville D and Taylor team. It was one of those directors.
Who are the Crank?
Yeah, they did Crank and Crank High Voltage.
And what, Ghost Rider? With Nick Cage?
Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance.
They did a bunch of Nick Cage movies.
So they're in the Nick Cage business, and business is good. Let's see. Damn it, now I lost my place. And it was directed by Brian Taylor, so that's who it was. And that was actually shot mostly here in Louisville, Kentucky, because people that we had worked with got to be background or extras in the scenes that took place at the school. So some of the people that were in some of our shorts, so like Dale Miller and Katie Stewart, were background in parts of that somewhere. I think you actually see Dale's face at some point. And then other people locally had been in there, because I know like some people that Julie's friends with who are actors were like in that scene. I don't think it ended up in like speaking roles or something, but they ended up like in that fray.
So that combined with one of the directors of Crank and it being Nick Cage, we were pretty interested in it. For me, it felt a little, the budget showed with this film. It felt a little hamstrung, just visually. Some of it just looked, in my memory, it just looked a little gritty, but not gritty beautiful. Just kind of like a
cheap gritty.
Yeah, it looked cheap.
They like added grit to it to maybe give it depth.
I don't know, but yeah,
it just looked cheap.
Yeah, it very much,
and it wasn't as balls to the wall with the editing and stuff as like Crank 2 or something.
It wasn't. I think
and Nick Cage was not, he's not as much as in it as much as you would have wanted to. What he does do is great, and there's some interesting stuff in there, and I kind of like the ending. But other than that, it's about
and Lance Hendrickson's
it's about the kids that attack their parents,
it's about parents that attack the kids.
Parents attack the kids. I've already forgotten the plot of that movie.
Oh, so like you talk about like the triumvirate. So you have like A Quiet Place, which is it can't hear you. Bird Boxes, it can't see you. Mom and Dad is if you listen to the sounds, you go crazy if you're an adult.
Oh, was it sounds? Honestly, that's how much I remember.
Or a TV signal or something.
So the best scene, I remember Lance Hendrickson popping up, loving that. And then I remember Nick Cage tearing up the pool table or whatever he was building.
Doing the hokey pokey.
That's the two good parts of that movie that I, generally love with no qualifiers or anything. It wasn't a bad movie, but
I think that what happens with a lot of this stuff is, so people that don't watch crazy genre stuff that often. They mostly just watch your kind of standard, dramas and big budget movie and all that type of standard fare. When they see something that's a little bit more out there, then to them it's a big deal. Same way with the play Book of Mormon or the show. If you've watched South Park before, or especially if you watch their movie South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, or that's the movie, right?
Yeah.
So you've seen the movie Book of Mormon is in the same vein as their South Park movie, really. No more offensive, really, at all, and it has stuff about like AIDS and things like that. So anybody who's been aware of like those, Matt Parker and Trey Stone or whatever, pretty standard. It's still really fun and enjoyable, and if you've never seen it, I would recommend seeing it. But to the people who are standard, like Broadway fans, to them it's super offensive because they're used to watching, like The Lion King or, more classy fare. So I think that's what happens with a lot of movies like Mom and Dad. So for us who watch a lot of stuff, it's like, there's some good parts in it. It wasn't anything that blew my mind, but people who typically don't watch that, when they see Nick Cage doing the hokey pokey while he tears apart a pool table with a sledgehammer, it's like, oh my God. So I think there's that disconnect some.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Burning or Wicker Man?
I mean, honestly, I still thought the movie, I think it's on Hulu now. If you've never seen it, you can go check it out. It's got Nick Cage in it being fun. Selma Blair's fun in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're good. It just, I think we could all probably agree that it was a little underwhelming again.
I mean, I think a lot
based
of
on
the failing,
expectations.
You wish it had a little bit bigger budget, and maybe the script was hamstrung by the budget also. But the script, the story just wasn't that
and a lot of it
really.
took place in like a house.
Yeah.
Just standard fare when it comes to things being constrained by budget.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Midnight Man, I don't think any of us saw that. Desolation.
Yeah, maybe that's a horror movie.
The Neighbor, I don't think any of us saw that. So February, Annihilation, which is the Alex Garland film.
Which is an interesting movie. It wasn't bad. There's two scenes in it that stick in my mind, and one of them's like the bear creature, which I think that alone, that creature is such an awesome design. And then there was a scene where they found like a soldier that had kind of transformed into something. It reminded me definitely something like out of Alien or Halo with the flood, where like his body's all strong, and like those two scenes to me stuck with me for a long time. I think they were so cool, but it's like you had those moments, and the movie never really lived up to that because it was a weird sci-fi movie that I think it really, in order to understand it, you almost need to maybe read the books. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's left out.
I think you don't even have to read you don't have to read the books,
but you
because
need to,
I think. Yeah, I've done some reading on it as far as
I went and did some after
there's
reading.
some parallels between lighthouses and I believe certain literature and stuff that are the reason that Lighthouse is the focus of this. There's a lot of layers to this film, and it's hard to see at first. A lot of stuff had to be pointed out for me, but I really enjoyed it first time through. Like it was one of my top ones when I saw it of the year, and I still just reading more about it. It's definitely one I'm going to keep revisiting. But it also can be very alienating. But I think it also has some great, just fun. Well, I don't want to say fun, but some great visual moments as well. And not that you have to just think about the entire movie and you get no reward as far as any sort of just basic level satisfaction of quote unquote horror.
This is a movie that I enjoyed watching, and the visual imagery was awesome. And some of the things that happened throughout were just unsettling.
I love the cast of characters and the actors.
Yeah,
The cast was really good.
Yeah, you had Oscar Isaac, Natalie Portman, all
Start
kinds
with
of
the
other
man,
people.
okay, William.
Well, he was in Star Wars, man. Oh, both him and Natalie
He's
Portman
not the
are Star
lead.
Wars
So
veterans.
we had Tessa Thompson, Natalie Portman. I've already forgot the other two. I forgot the other two names. Because Tessa Thompson has been in everything this year.
What's the actress that was in Hateful Eight too?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Why can't
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yeah, Jennifer Jason Leigh.
So good cast, good idea, and it's one of those things where a lot of times too I measure movies like after the fact of after seeing it. Do I then still think about it or read up on it? And I did go read up on a lot of stuff about Annihilation after the fact.
I think that bodes well for it because I think to me like movies, regardless if a movie is good or bad, if it leaves any type of lasting impression on you, then it did something.
Well, I
'Cause I think if you go in a movie and you watch it and you're like, that was good or that was bad. Like, if I'm a bad movie, I'd rather be so bad that it gets into your mind and you just talk about it all the time about how, because it did something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, if it's
Last Jedi did it to some
yeah,
people.
and it's like then at the end of the day, there's really something you like about it, because you like, I can probably say that because I talk about Chrome Skull bad all the time. Like, obviously,
Laid to
movie-
rest.
whatever. But again, that's a movie I hated it so much, but it left an imprint, and it did something. Because there are some movies we've watched that I just forget about that were in. But if I'm going to be so off-putting or bland or bad or good or whatever you want to leave an impression, this movie definitely did that, because I went and did a bunch of reading on the movie after it, because it was interesting. You wanted to know more about the universe and kind of where that went. So whatever it did something for me, and I did like it. I just think that the ending was so bizarre that, you know, because it elicited reactions from the people in the crowd that I was with that was like of laughter, and somebody fell asleep.
Well, I think
So-
that whenever you have these movies that look like cool genre movies and they get like a stellar cast for it, I think what happens oftentimes is that will then draw in a general audience. And not putting people down who only watch kind of mainstream fare, but people go into these
The ones
things
that make the money.
and they're like, oh, well, why? Like, instead of the way, not giving any spoilers for how Annihilation ended, but people wanted that to end instead of this kind of weird way that had all this kind of stuff you would have never sat there and thought up ahead of time. They wanted her to have like
to fight a bear creature,
they wanted-
save Oscar Isaac, and save the world.
They wanted her to have like an assault rifle and like have the grenade launcher on the bottom and launch a grenade
what
into
you're saying
something.
is they wanted Predator. They wanted
Yeah.
the Arnold
Because a lot of
Schwarzenegger
people were
ending like
comparing
that.
this movie initially, saying it had similarities to the original Predator.
There's one scene in the entire movie that did, and outside of that, it was an unfair comparison.
Well, I mean, it's also just a group of people going into
Yeah.
an unknown territory and looking to see what's going on. I mean,
But, I mean, there's a lot of layers to this film because everybody brings their tragedy to the Shimmer,
Yeah.
and how that is dealt with reflects their fate in the film, and
it's something I definitely want to revisit.
yeah, I mean, there's just so much to this film, and I think it's definitely one people will be able to think about and revisit for many years to come.
this
This film is going to keep giving back years over years.
and the movie, I think it's on Hulu now, right?
And I think somebody said Amazon Prime
Yes,
as
it's on
well.
Prime, yeah.
Because a big deal with the movie was initially when they were making the movie, Alex Garland was given final cut privileges. And when it got towards the end of the movie and they had seen it, the studio said, well, we'd really like for you to change the ending to something more mainstream and palatable because we don't think it's going to do well in theaters. And since he
did
had
the-
final cut, he said,
And he
nope.
did the DX thing, the suck it.
Yeah. He's
Which
like, I
I
have
think-
2 words for you. So then he kept the ending, the studio's like, damn it. So then they pre-sold the distribution rights. So the United States and a few other territories it came to theaters, but then across the rest of the world, they sold the distribution rights to Netflix. So when it went, in theaters in the U.S., like shortly thereafter is available via Netflix in Europe and the rest of the world. So that probably hurt the box office some because people probably pirated it
Yeah.
or, things like that, or used like a proxy to log into Netflix UK or something. So that probably hurt the box office prospects. But, at the same time, would you have rather seen the movie's ending be watered down to, because the book is
To
not,
where you could forget about it, yeah.
the book isn't straightforward. The books that these are based on.
And the books is like multiple series, like trilogy
Yeah,
or
there's
something.
3 books.
And this does not end for that. He wanted to make one film.
Yeah, because
and
Alex
tell one
Garland
story.
read the first book once and then wrote the script for this, not incorporating some of the stuff that was in the later books. Because there was some backlash against the movie because the character that Natalie Portman portrayed, like there were some allusions in later books or something that the character might have been Asian, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and
I thought it was Native American.
or whatever. I think
She was a different
Asian.
Yeah, I think
ethnicity.
you're
There was
right.
the character was the description given of the character in later books indicated more of an ethnic background.
Alex like, I didn't read those books.
And then he's like, I read the first book, which didn't have any description of that.
Isn't it so great how movies get made? You know what I mean? Like they're super fans, and he's like, I read the first book once. I'm making a million, multi-million-dollar movie based on it.
I mean, and two, like sometimes that's just like, what's the concept? Because
Yeah.
the books are a lot more
I mean,
obscure
that's,
than the movie
The Shining,
was.
you know.
Because the book has
Well,
people turning into creatures.
I'm
and-
glad you brought up The Shining because I'm not comparing this film or anything to Kubrick that ever
I'm
made.
talking about the adaptation,
but
even, the process.
Yeah, but it's kind of Kubrick-esque because I do like where he's like, this is the ending I did.
Yeah.
I'm not changing it.
Yeah.
And again, like this is nowhere near anything Kubrick.
And he
but
took apparently a lot of liberties with the book.
But
to
the
make-
ending did feel kind of like Kubrick-esque, or maybe not even that, but like it would feel right to me to see it like in a Space Odyssey.
I would say
Yeah.
the ending was far more 2001: A Space Odyssey than it was Star Wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what
And-
people wanted was Star Wars, and what they got was something that you had a thought. You could kind of interpret it however you wanted at the end, and I think that's not what people.
Yeah,
that's not the
even
general audience.
the ending was even a little bit more up to interpretation than something like 2001: A Space Odyssey with like the monolith and the space baby, and because that, when you think about it, the story like that does kind of break down logically that he gets turned into the Star Child or whatever, and they had the sequels to that
David
they
Bowie.
made, but yeah, so Annihilation.
And also, real quick too, if you do like Annihilation, last I checked, Best Buy had the exclusives for the 4K disc.
Yeah.
So the only way to get that is through Best Buy. And I don't know if they're gonna just quit making them, or you would think they wouldn't be manufacturing those forever for Best Buy.
Yeah.
Which is a weird, I guess, deal. I guess it's an exclusive. So if you really love that film, I'm sure there'll probably be re-releases one day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There'll be some sort of other edition. But if you do want that 4K disc, Best Buy I think is the place
or
to get
as
it.
my dad refers to it, Best Buys.
Best Buys.
Let's see, other movies that came out in February. I'm not sure if any of us saw these. So
didn't see
Living Among Us, Winchester. So I believe Winchester was the one that had Helen Mirren in it and was about the Winchester house.
I watched it.
Oh, you did?
I watched it recently, and
Wasn't Jason Clarke in that too?
yeah,
or-
it was just like it was an interesting premise, but it was just a bad movie because like
What's the premise of it?
it's about the widow of the Winchester. Like she builds this house to keep spirit, and it just
I did watch
like,
that trailer.
Yeah, and it just the lore of it. If
So
you
the
know
Winchester, Winchester.
it's like the woman who
gun
inherited-
maker.
Yeah, the gun maker.
Yeah,
like
so
her
the
husband died.
titular Winchester.
Yeah, she inherited all the money, and then she has like, if you know like the history, she kind of thinks there's like demons or a curse. So she builds this huge house, and then just keeps it building because they say as long as she keeps building the house, things won't happen.
And they have hallways and
And they
rooms
have
that go
hallways that go
nowhere.
nowhere, and then it was like it's an interesting concept.
Especially, it's based on a true story.
Yeah, it's based
so
on a
that's
true
why-
story.
I think isn't
Well,
the
the-
story is
embellished?
completely elaborate.
I mean, it's
completely-
embellished. Yes,
I hope
but
she
I mean,
went around
original.
shooting ghosts the whole
Yeah.
time with a Winchester.
No, but like at the core, it's like based on a true thing, but it's just like you'd probably get more out of watching any paranormal show investigation on.
Well, I was
it,
gonna say
getting some
like, or,
background.
like when the podcast Lore had an
Covered
episode
it.
about it. So
Yeah.
I think in some cases with these historical things, listening to a podcast that's just about the history of it, or watching
Might
one of,
actually
like,
be creepier.
or watching like one of the TV shows where they have like the interviews of people related to it or historians, and then they have video of the. Sometimes that's more interesting than these movies that are quote unquote based on true events.
because they never are. And like for example, like BuzzFeed and Solve, they have a paranormal podcast, and they went and investigated it twice. They did it again this season and the first, and you might get more out of watching that than the movie.
Spoiler alert: ghosts are
too,
real.
If it's a really good movie, then the movie can do whatever. But this is not a movie that.
Yeah, it was- I think it has a 0%
that
on Rotten-
exceeds those other.
Well, and
investigative-
I think
like-
it has a 0% Rotten Tomatoes,
Okay.
and that's accurate.
Like, so a movie that we had reviewed on the podcast was an older movie, was The Changeling, which I think is on Shudder now. That's a movie that was kind of loosely based on real events. I mean, it was based on stuff that the author or wasn't it the screenwriter?
Yeah.
Had supposedly experienced, and that was interesting. But
Yeah.
that was like a legit good movie. So I think sometimes like having a real story is a good jumping off point. But any of like the Haunting in Connecticut movies or whatever, where it's like based on a true story, it's like nothing like
this is more in the veins of stuff like
happened.
that. And again, I think like you'd probably get more creeped out just watching the show on like Discovery or whatever the Travel Channel when they have
Travel Channel.
not Zach Braff. What's the guy's
Zach
name?
Brannigan or
Zach
something.
Brannigan.
Is that
Come
his
fight me,
name?
ghost. Come fight. You'd probably enjoy that more than watching that.
I want to see a
Oh, Demon House. Yeah.
haunted trailer park movie. That's
Trailer
in
Park
the
Boys?
tone,
I wanna see
the
a
tone
haunted-
of like the Conjuring and stuff.
But I want the Trailer Park Boys involved. I want Bubbles in there.
That'd be a good Halloween.
Oh, it's Zach
special.
Baggins.
Yeah, Zach Baggins. You might get more of him. Like, come fight me, you ghost.
Bilbo Baggins. Let's see. So other February movies, House of Demons.
Is that the Zach?
No.
Is that come out this year?
Yes, it'll
Okay,
be.
we'll talk about that.
it's,
We'll talk
it's
about that.
coming up, Jared.
Okay,
Calm
okay.
your
He fought ghosts.
Pull
He took
your
his shirt
jets.
off and he screamed at Ghost.
Fight of the year.
Fake
Zach
blood.
Baggins versus Ghost.
Fake Blood. I don't think anybody saw that. Stillborn, a movie called November that was on Shudder.
Yeah, I want to watch that. The font looks like The Witch.
Oh.
And I didn't know what the movie was called for a while because the title, the
It's hard to
thumbnail
read.
is NOV, and then the second line is ER and then BER or EMBER. So it looked like it was some other language, and then like, oh wait, it's just November. So yeah, that is on Shudder, and I've heard some decent things about that.
Primal Rage, which
Not
is
the
not based
video
on the
game.
video game.
Which I'm about to get for Sega. So
Let's see. So March, there was the Eli Roth Death Wish remake starring Bruce Willis. And most of the reviews for that seem to indicate that Willis was just phoning it in and not caring, which, like jumping ahead just a tiny bit. So the trailers and all that stuff I've seen for Glass, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie,
looks invested.
that is like Unbreakable and Split's crossover sequel.
What?
Bruce Willis actually looks like he really cares about that.
Yeah.
So I guess you pair him like up with the director that he has worked with before and the material he engages with.
Or a good script.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Death Wish remake was at some point written by Joe Carnahan. I'm not sure if it went through rewrites, but
I did not watch
that
it.
movie seems mistimed by about a decade.
Yeah.
or 2 decades. I mean,
Yeah.
And two, you can't remake a Charles Bronson movie. That's just a rule.
yeah. I mean, none of us have seen it to really give an
Like, I'm not
opinion,
against
but-
remakes. I'm just saying, like, there's a couple of guys and women out there that you can't, like, you could not remake Audrey Hepburn movie with somebody else. Like Breakfast at Tiffany's, you can't touch that.
I think they're doing a.
I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing Death Wish to Breakfast at Tiffany's. But I'm just saying,
tomato.
like, I'm just saying, like, you have certain people that do roles, and it's like the remake is never going to.
I think they're remaking Enter the Dragon. Wasn't
you
there some
can't
buzz
do
about that? Wasn't there some buzz about that?
Yeah, you can't do that because that's like, to me, like Bruce Lee, like you just. Maybe if he hadn't died and he got to live out and had a bunch of other movies, it might be different. But I think something like that, it's like, that was the way it is, and without him being involved in it, or people, I think you stay away from
All
it.
right, let's see. So, a movie called Mohawk? Question mark.
Maybe horror. That's
Yeah,
what
I'm sure.
that's what I don't know. I'm going by thumbnails. I'm just giving some lip service to say, hey,
Here's some stuff that's
make
out there. You
sure
can go
again it
look
wasn't
into.
something that popped up that somebody watched.
Strangers Pray at Night. So I did see that, and
See, it's play because instead of and pray with it, it's pray with the E.
So
Yeah.
they are smart.
yeah. So it's their prey at nighttime.
They're not praying.
they're not
I thought this was a
praying.
religious film until I read that there was an E in there.
Yeah,
Strangers Pray at
strangers,
Night.
comma pray at night.
God is real, and it's not that. This is
It's got Kevin Sorbo and Kirk Cameron
and
in it.
Melissa Joan
When he
Hart.
said Kevin Sorbo for a second, I thought, oh, he was in Strangers Pray at Night, and then I remembered he doesn't.
Yeah, so
religious
Strangers
films.
Pray at Night had Christina Hendrickson. It was the most recognizable actress. She was from like Mad Men. And,
She in it a lot.
she's in it for a bit. She's like one of the parents. But there's like the daughter and son get the most screen time because they're the ones who are like the young kids that are running around and be more active.
Is this set the 80s or just 80s vibe?
80s vibe, current day setting.
And I've heard that some people like this more
So-
than you liked it, and it's more of a slasher, right?
It's more of a slasher than a home invasion because it's kind of like in a little vacation trailer park area.
Oh, so it is a trailer park. Go.
So there's really because it's like area like a vacation area that like when we go to the lake they have like little cabins.
Wasn't this shot in
things.
Kentucky also?
Northern Kentucky and
Yeah.
like Cincinnati.
So
I
like
think
it would
parts
be
were-
kind of like too if you're going like Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge.
I went up
places.
71 and stayed in, I can't remember what park it was, but it was an RV park up 71.
Yeah.
So I guess it's something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was more like so. Derek, you remember this when we used to go to the lake? They have like all the little cabins that are in some of the areas. It's more like that. So
Okay.
like,
Those are kind of trailers. I mean, the
yeah,
way they-
trailers,
Yeah,
whatever.
they had cabins there too, but we were just in an RV.
The entire point of this is they're at an off seat. They're staying because I think like the daughter's acting up and getting in trouble, and like the son's an athlete who does well and who doesn't get in trouble. So they're like, I think to calm her down or something, they're going to stay at like their relatives' own this like little recreational vacation spot, but it's off season after everybody's gone. So they go there to stay for a while. And then while they're there, the strangers show up. So that's like the setup. And it's much more of a slasher movie with like heavy 80s influences and vibes and music. And there's a lot of like zoom shots and stuff that aren't as prevalent now.
Do
And
they
the main
kill somebody at the TV and say it's primetime bitch?
no.
Okay, then I'm not
the
interested.
main thing that people seem to who are in its camp and say it's a great movie or they really like it. The main thing they point to is one scene that takes place in a pool where there's like neon palm tree lights and stuff on that was pretty cool and it's set to music and all that stuff. So that was an enjoyable sequence. I don't think that makes the entire movie worth watching, but that one sequence was really cool and seems to be something that a lot of people point to as a fun moment. And it's just that the original Strangers is more like home invasion type stuff. This one's more of a slasher where it's like, and part of it was slightly maybe in the editing was bad, or I just wasn't making attention. I was like, wait a minute, are there two of the guys now? Because where they were like, the way it was shot, it seemed like they transported across the location really quickly.
Cross the 180
It was like
line
a
or
glitch.
something.
Like
No. It's just like they're in one spot with this character right now, and then on the entire opposite end of the complex by another character immediately. So I was like, are there two of the dudes now? And it was just the way they had cut it. Maybe they had trimmed out like a little tertiary scene that
Yeah.
showed somebody going somewhere. So I was
like they would put in a shot of just some feet running across
I
some
was
leaves or
confused.
something.
I was confused for a moment because like this character went from here to there so quickly.
He's the Flash.
But you
So,
know,
and the script wise, is it pretty much standard fare slasher? You know, they survived.
I don't-
nothing left you thinking or thought that it was an interesting twist or anything.
no, I mean it
Okay.
was very straightforward at the end of it. So I will just say like, if they were to make another well, you know, regardless of the box office performance, if they made another Strangers movie, I'd be like, this movie really. If they made another one after this, it would destroy the credibility of this series. Not that the series, it's just like this is supposed to be
set-
real world.
This is set after the first one, right?
Yes.
And take place in like 2009 or something. Is it
It's-
right?
It's not super clear exactly what the date is. They have cell phones, but
But it's not, not current day.
yeah, so it's not clear exactly when it is. The idea was it maybe took place like the night after the first one or
Okay,
something. So
cool.
like it took place in 2008, 9-ish maybe.
And that's on Amazon Prime now, I think. I think
Yeah, so you
I
can
think
check
it
it
just
out.
popped up because I was going to try to get to that, but
Let's see. Then these next two are movies that I had seen. I don't think anyone else did. So Demon House and Unsane.
I
Oh, you watched Demon House?
Yeah, because
So Demon House is the
Baggins
Zach
or whatever.
Baggins documentary, and that's about this house in Indiana.
it's the ghost hunting Tom
where
Cruise.
this house in Indiana where apparently the family that lived there was being heavily possessed and haunted, and then the kid was at a hospital and like crawled up the wall, and a social worker witnessed it. And so if you believe that, but then the documentary goes into some of the history of the house. I thought this was less entertaining than a traditional like episode of a lot of these types of shows.
Oh, I mean, because my problem with it is like it was one of those things where I honestly feel like it. I mean, like, not to say these shows don't ever like take
Liberties.
but this one felt like they tried to like make a actual movie.
Well, he bought the house.
He bought the house,
And then they burn it?
But he's like in the house, like, you're not gonna get me, ghost. I ain't gonna fall for this. And he's like running around the house, like.
Well, at one point at the end, he like locks himself in the house.
Yeah, and then he actually is gonna beat somebody up. But and I guess the only weird thing is that there were a couple of people, like one of the guys, like after being in the house, like has
People who are involved
got
with
like
it.
seriously ill, and
Yeah, people are involved with the
They had black
documentary.
mold, probably.
yeah,
People who were involved in a very tangential basis had like one of the guys got cancer. This one woman that they were going to have be involved with it got killed by her partner.
Yeah.
and like some other stuff. So I mean, just coincidental.
It's weird, but it is coincidental. Is it real or is it not? I don't know. But to me, it seemed kind of like. I do think that some of the people that witnessed things thought they really saw stuff, but then again, like I've just watched so much paranormal stuff, and we watch a bunch of movies.
Well, just and
I
listen,
think it's very easy for a group of people to get freaked out by the way somebody acts, and then think that they've seen things they really didn't.
Isn't it just interesting what TV cameras do to this type of thing? Like those people that maybe experience some stuff might watch us and be like, look, he's just making this a show trying to fight these ghosts. Like this shit happened or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just interesting, like how much different he would probably be if no cameras were there, and what he has to do. Maybe because he bought this house, they've got to make some money. They've got to sell, they've got to get some streams for this. Like it's just, and it's a weird thing. It's almost like with him, I haven't seen it, but it just makes me think of like wrestlers. They put on a show.
That's
it seems like he was doing like the wrestler promo for the ghost.
That's
like
I'm so glad you said that, because this is like the WWE of haunted house.
like, you ghost
investigations.
sucker,
And he's
you're
like,
gonna come down here.
I'm gonna
you
stop
gotta
you.
build the drama through a little bit of dialogue, and then that it's just it's
and
just
like
a weird.
one of the guys went crazy on the staff.
so
it's a weird evolution of ghost hunting
The
shows. It
biggest-
kind of started like in the late 90s, early 2000s.
The biggest evidence that they produced over the course of this documentary about there being actual ghost stuff going at this house. In one frame, there's a video of like a hand, or what looks like a hand, going like that through a doorway. So you see, like, if you're watching the video stuff, like, so this is the edge of the frame. You see like a hand go like, and then like they see it like on 3 frames of like one shot.
Like,
and then it's like, I mean, like, here's the thing: working with video stuff,
weird things happen.
Well, a lot of times too, you'll have like a lens flare, but the way it is, it doesn't look like a traditional lens flare. So there's a lot of things with video that you can see something in the video that wasn't there in real life because of something that's on the lens, something that's on the sensor, something that's reflecting off of a fleck of dust that's on the lens.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these things that can cause that. You can have digital corruption of stuff where you see like movement or, you know, compression can cause that. So there's a lot of things.
Which is very convenient for these ghost hunting shows.
Well, I've just seen so many different things. It's like, well, I say that certain things are odd. Yes. Do I think that did I see anything in this to give me, which I love ghost stuff. I believe in ghosts, but nothing in this I watched made me.
Some guy that's on the.
That's what sucks because like some of the stuff can really get you into it, and it's really good when it's handled right. And it's like, okay, well now you're just going so far there, it's hard to take it seriously.
Like,
you know, it's hard to even get into it now
'Cause I think
you're trying to bring so much more out of it.
Yeah, I think the appeal of watching them is like they are the WWE of ghost investigators, so they're typically more ridiculous. Now, it wasn't the usual crew that he has with him; it was a different group. There's usually a couple of guys that I recognize. I didn't recognize any of the other guys. So I don't know if they just used.
Well,
a
then
different
there's
crew
like
for this.
another big piece of evidence is one of the guy on their crew got really aggressive or something.
Yeah, they had to restrain him, and then they had to make him leave, and he had like a relapse into alcoholism or something, and that was one of the things that happened to him, like or drugs or something, and they got. So I mean, there is like weird stuff. Is all coincidence? Who knows? But I mean,
I would love like if I'm in court because I got a DUI or something. Like
it was a ghost.
It's like, man, a spirit possessed me, and then the judge is like, you know what? Innocent.
I'll allow it.
Yeah.
You know, charges thrown out.
You know, but
and then
honestly, if you're stuck in a house in the middle of nowhere in Indiana, waiting for ghosts to show up for months and with camera, I'm sure it's probably really easy to relapse. You know what I mean? That probably wasn't good for that guy.
And then something
Had a good
else,
environment.
like,
Yeah.
Bored on his ass.
also
when it's in the winter, when it's like snowy.
It was in Muncie, Indiana, or it was somewhere in Indiana, and it was
it Gary?
It was Gary. And it was like
I've been through Gary,
but like where it was at is also a really bad area because like even some of the people there told him like, yeah, this is a bad area, so you might not want to do this or that because apparently it's a high violence area. So I would assume too, like a lot of the stuff, because I'm pretty sure they heard gunshots there one time. They're sitting there filming stuff at night, so it's not a good area. And it's just funny because like they do tear the house down at the end.
A lot
and
of
then he
those-
like saved a step, but he's like, nobody take anything. We have to destroy this house.
yeah, because where was the house?
I think you're right. I think it was in Gary, Indiana. Because I remember locally, you know, because we're in Louisville.
Yeah,
and
Gary, Indiana in 2011. So Gary, Indiana, we were going to Chicago because of some backups in the expressway. We went through Gary, Indiana. The parts that I went through, from what I remember, the main strip of the city was like, you know, a four lane road or 5 lane road with like a turning lane in the middle that goes through like the center of the city. A lot of the grass has grown up out almost into the street. A lot of the houses look to be in states of like complete disrepair.
It's not. I just remember like when he had the cop there, he was telling like
the
it's not
newest,
a good area where he was
the
at.
only new buildings that we saw as we drove through were a church and there's 3 buildings we saw that were new: a church, a strip club, and a 24-hour check cashing place.
Yeah, and if you were to watch Parks and Rec, that is where Gary went to vacation, which is Gary, Indiana.
No, his favorite was Muncie.
Muncie. He was a
Yes.
Gary.
So you know that
Jerry. Sorry.
So
Jerry.
basically, when it comes to Demon House, if you're a fan of the Zach Baggins and the Ghost Adventures, or whatever, you'll probably enjoy it. If you want something that will make you question your beliefs on the supernatural
This
or
is
something,
not
this is
that.
not it. Let's see, Unsane. So that's the new Steven Soderbergh movie that was shot on an iPhone that had Claire Foy in it.
On Prime now, I believe.
It's on Amazon Prime now, so if you want to watch that, you can. This is a movie I was more interested in because of the shot on iPhone gimmick, really. It's about a young woman who has been like a victim of stalking. And then at some point she gets committed to a facility and you don't know, like, is she hallucinating things because of just being overly worried about stalking, or is it real? You know, the performances are good. Shooting on the iPhone, at certain points you don't really notice it that much. At other points, I'm like, I get that they wanted to shoot like, you know, an experimental movie type that was easier to shoot, you know, because like an iPhone is cheap and all that stuff. At a certain point, it's like, well, I don't really understand why you would use the iPhone over, because an unlocked iPhone costs about $1,000. Because I think when I bought my phone, you get like the payment plan deal. It's like $1,000. If you're an Android user that hates iPhones, it says it's overpriced. Even the Galaxy phones are, you know, at least $800 unlocked and stuff. I don't get why they would go with that over just getting like $1,000 like mirrorless camera with the kit lens and just use that. or even like there's like the Sony like RX 100 cameras or whatever. Like, so there's all these things you could get for about the same amount that would look a lot better. So I don't really understand why the iPhone specifically. I guess this is more of a marketing point that we shot this on a cell phone versus we shot it on a $1,000 point and shoot camera.
In my pocket.
There's a lot of ways they could have shot it.
Stuff. Add-ons, you know.
Yeah, I mean the budget was still like $1 million. So they still have professional audio and stuff. Just some of the outdoor scenes, the highlights are blown out, and it just looks kind of bad.
Distracting, you think, for you because you notice that stuff more, or do you think it may have?
For an average person, they may not notice it as much. I was just like, man, all these highlights are blown out outside. Because typically, when you have outdoor scenes, when it's a professional film, it's shot in a way that if there's a character sitting there, their skin tone is properly lit, so you can see them. It's properly exposed. You can see their face and their eyes. And then if there's like a building in the background, you can see that as well too. And it's not just the brick building is so blown out, it's kind of a white blob. It's usually shot in a way that you can see everything. So I don't know if that was just a byproduct of not using ND filters on the camera or what, but at certain points it's a little distracting. And those cameras, they're not very good in low light. So some scenes are a little bit dark. But overall, like if you take that element out, it's still an interesting movie. Some parts of it kind of stretch credibility a little bit because we were just sitting there thinking, I was like, well, how did this character get to work at this? You know, like there's things where it's just like, I don't understand the sequence of events that allows this person to be here and it make any sense at all unless there was something I just completely missed. I was like, this seems like a lot of times if, you know, if I'm not spoiling anything, but like if there's, just like in reality, if somebody goes and works at a new business, you don't just show up. I mean, people go through background checks and you know, people know their co-workers. So there's some stuff that stretch credibility a little bit. And if you watch it, you know what I'm talking about. Overall, I still thought it was enjoyable. Unfortunately, it is slightly triggering for a lot of women because a lot of women I know have been stalked to some extent. And this movie has elements of that. So the only thing I'd say is if you're anybody,
so I guess it's effective in the stalking stuff if it's triggering at all, because you know you can put something to film and if it's not done well, then it's like you have no reaction.
Well,
so I guess the stalking stuff is done well in it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's more just the motivation of the male character because there's so many people, so many women I know, especially like any women who do acting stuff, and then like men will just message them stuff. And then they don't respond, or if they do respond, then that only emboldens them. And then the conversation is literally like some guy saying, "Oh, you're super beautiful, and I really like this movie you're in." Blah blah blah. And the one's like, "Oh, thank you." And then the guy, like 2 months later, is like, "Why aren't you responding to my messages? Your boyfriend's just jealous of me because of the connection we have. We're meant to be together. When can I see you?" So it's that type of stuff. And this movie encapsulates like a character doing that, taking it, you know, even further. And so there's that element. Spoiler, not spoiler, I'm joking. I don't remember what I've said about the movie, but like, so just the idea is a lot of women encounter that. Not even people who do acting, just general women. Like when I was in college, I remember women where there were like men who would just keep talking to them and trying to message them and not taking no for an answer, and even being like meeting them outside when they're walking to classes. So it's just like women deal with a lot of crap like that. And this movie was just, you know, a story about that. So it could be slightly triggering to people that have experienced that. Overall, is a decent thriller that you can check out. But nothing I think is like top 10 of the year. Interesting because it's from Soderbergh and it's on an iPhone. Yep. And it had Claire Foy, who's in The Crown and was like the new girl with the dragon tattoo, which isn't doing too well. And then the guy, and I'm forgetting his name, was in the original Blair Witch Project.
Played the witch.
Let's see. And then
it's still a notable release of this year.
Yeah, it's a Soderbergh movie shot on iPhone. I mean, it's still like an interesting movie that's worth watching.
Yeah.
At some point, especially for anybody who's like into filmmaking and just seeing what it looked like. And I'll probably will rewatch it to see what it looks like on a TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other movie came out in March, Followers, which I don't think I've just watched. Pyewacket, which I know has gotten some buzz.
Yeah, I meant to try to watch that because some people seem to be really into that.
We just didn't have time to get around to it. The Executioners. So April, I think we'll save the biggest one for last because that's one we all saw to talk about. And that was A Quiet Place. The Endless is on Netflix, so I actually did watch this.
Okay, good. It's on some other list, too.
And this is the filmmaking team that made Spring, Resolution. This is kind of a loose sequel to Resolution, which I have not seen, so I need to go back and rewatch that. But Resolution was shot in like 2012, I think, on like a pretty small budget on a Red camera. So The Endless is kind of like a loose sequel to that. And it's essentially like two brothers that were in a cult that got out of the cult in like their teens or whatever are now in their 20s or whatever, early 30s, and one of them wants to go back to visit just to see how things are going. So they go back to the compound just to visit, to kind of get the one brother to, drop it. And then while they're there, they run into like weird instances, and you don't know exactly what's going on or what the deal with the cult is. And like, without like spoiling, it's like a sci-fi. Like how a while back there's like the big trend with mumblecore stuff.
Yeah.
And mumblecore is essentially just, dialogue heavy films or comedies, drama. There was even like, mumblecore horror stuff. This is kind of more, I would say, kind of the mumblecore, because there's like a lot of character interactions with some, good actors and good actresses and people that generally like their performances. And you're trying to figure out what the mystery is. It's, lower budgeted.
From what I gathered, from what I had saw, they were kind of still not even to the camp. But it does seem like they have these characters in place and motivations and stuff and backgrounds. And then they were they were possibly riffing on, like they knew what the relationship was, and they were kind of just experimenting with that. And then they used some of that in the film. And it, it feels a little unstructured, like it doesn't feel stilted, which is a good thing, but also it doesn't feel focused. It's just a process. I loved Spring that they did previously.
Yeah, I'd say that this is a little bit less narratively focused than Spring.
Yeah.
Like, I still liked it, and I think that I would like to see more of these, lower budgeted kind of sci-fi films that are not really tied down, like with lower budget, they're not tied down to having to have a, 4-quadrant storyline that's, the standard 3-act structure with all the stuff that you come to expect. Like, I didn't come away with things like my favorite movies of the year, but I did enjoy it enough. And I was like, I'd like to see more movies that do stuff in this mold, like these different ideas and concepts that aren't trying to be a movie that appeals to everybody. And it's something I enjoyed. I recommend checking out if you're into kind of sci-fi stuff. I do need to go back and watch their movie Resolution, because apparently there's some threads that connect between them. And there's like sci-fi stuff, so there is something going on. You do get some idea of what it is.
Not scary though, probably.
No, not really scary. I mean, there's some elements where you might, be unnerved because you don't know what's going on. And it can be kind of, just not knowing what it is can be scary.
Yeah.
But then once you kind of get a feel for it, it's more kind of like sci-fi.
Yeah.
But I still enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like my favorite movie of the year, but it's something I recommend checking out on Netflix if you're into kind of like lower budgeted. And I'm not meaning like micro budget. I mean like, a few $100,000. I enjoyed it. I look forward. Apparently that team is working on a newer, bigger budgeted movie that's going to be coming out soon. So I'll be interested to see what they do.
Yeah, I like Spring,
their work.
and I actually kind of forgot. Like, this is the year. Normally, I'll finish a movie a lot of times. This is like the year so many films I started and just didn't finish. But it's easy when it's on streaming.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'm going to start this tonight. And then a couple of days go by and a week goes by and you're like, oh, wait, I don't remember.
Especially, too, when you have a kid.
Yeah, that's what's made it that's what's made it real hard this year. And it's been real easy to not finish these movies.
Let's see. So You Were Never Really Here. That was the Joaquin Phoenix film.
Which is something I really need to watch.
Yeah, I don't really, I was like, put it on there, I'm like, I don't, some people had it on their horror list, I think.
It just seems to me it's more of a
I
genre.
don't know.
movie.
Yeah. And even still, it's.
Is it I know a little bit of the plot. And is it more of just a revenge type movie? Is it in the revenge genre?
I mean, I don't know if
he's not the one that's been wrong, but I know like he
essentially is a vet who will go and rescue women who are captured or something. It's supposed to be people that are used for human trafficking and stuff, so he kind of has a guy that gets clients, and he gets Joaquin Phoenix to go out and rescue these girls. So it's nothing personal at first, but I guess now that I'm thinking about it, things do turn that way. It becomes more personal. So I guess it is kind of a revenge.
I just wonder if you
now that I think about it overall
type of movie. Because I love.
I don't know why the second half zipped out of my mind, because it is really good. The second half is really good too. I think I was just more focused on the first, because you're kind of figuring out what this film is, and figuring out what his character is, which I think his character is very interesting. It's not. I wouldn't consider it horror though, but definitely recommend checking it out.
Let's see some other movies. So Truth or Dare, we did not see.
No, I've seen the original one that was made for like Hallmark or Sci-Fi Network like last year, And nothing I saw from that would make me want to watch the remake of a movie from a year prior that was theatrical release with, I guess.
Was it actually a remake?
Yeah, because they had like made it for Sci-Fi or like
wow.
the Hallmark like the year before, and then you had the only way I can say this is just the prettier people version,
Well, the Blumhouse.
Yeah,
like,
it just they went and found like this whatever I guess more noteworthy people actors.
I mean, like the concept like Truth or Dare is just kind of
there's a guy. It's just like people getting stuck in this game
and they get, like the grins on their face.
Well,
and,
it's almost like It Follows, where like you get involved in it, and the only way to get out of it is get other people involved in it. So a guy like takes people to his house and is like, "All right, here you go, I'm out," and leaves, and then they had to deal with it. So
let's see. So other stuff we didn't see was it Gonjiam Haunted Asylum,
Yeah, I don't know. Didn't see that, but
Edge of Isolation, The Devil and Father Amorth,
yeah, I feel like I saw some people talking about
Corbin
that at
Nash.
which looked like a vampire film from the thumbnail.
Ghost Stories was that movie that Martin Freeman was in. That was
Morgan Freeman.
Martin Freeman, the Hobbit,
Yeah, no, I was just hoping more.
and then also
The
in,
Office.
Yeah, Tim from the British
Yeah, I know
Office.
who
Ghost Stories was a movie, was an anthology of sorts that I thought it was enjoyable enough. It didn't end up on my top 10 list. The posters and some of the promotional materials made me think it'd be a little bit like pulpier or kind of more just fun. But it was more of like a more contemplative movie. Like I really wasn't crazy with how it ended because there was another movie that ended in a very similar fashion this year. I was like, Like, granted, those movies probably were in production separately and nothing connected between them. But it's just
Unfortunate, coincidence possibly.
But it's just like I haven't really seen anybody else point that connection out. Just to me, it's like, well, if both movies end with like this, everything's going through the same filter, and that's the reason that the endings are the same to me. Like that's whatever. But it was an enjoyable enough movie. It has a good cast. To me, it just didn't do anything that made it be like, oh, you have to watch this. It was
Yeah.
more of like, oh, this is okay. Because we had rented this on video on demand, and it's nothing that I just came away. It's telling you guys like, oh, you have to see this. It was more like, oh, if you see it on something, streaming, check it out. And of course, Avengers: Infinity War came out.
Yeah,
It's
not horror either, but
huge
Just
release.
a notable release.
Biggest, the worldwide box office grossing champion for the year. And then Black Panther came out back in February, was like the domestic champion on box office. So, big superhero movies that, we had talked about back when they came out. Both are on Netflix now.
In a couple
US
of these,
Netflix.
I did add like some action films that were maybe kind of trying to be a little bit more pure action. That's
Yeah.
the only other thing I added that wasn't pure horror. Just in case you guys,
Let's see,
I don't know if we're gonna have an action category or not. I don't think we've seen enough.
So we haven't
some
seen
of
a
the-
comprehensive,
Yeah.
but we can, at least mention stuff. So then, like the big horror, genre release for April, was A Quiet Place, the John Krasinski directed movie that had him and Emily Blunt. That was about essentially there's creatures, and if they hear you, they will kill you, but they can't see you, so you just have to be quiet.
Yeah.
And
So it's just tremors on land.
it's them, so it's John Krasinski and Emily Blunt trying to keep their kids alive,
There's
and
no
their
Kevin
daughter
Bacon.
has hearing impairment, which makes it obviously more difficult for her to be able to hear what's going on. So you think about like if you had to be quiet or else these creatures could hear you and come and kill you, not being able to hear completely would be a huge problem.
Yeah, but not being able to being blind would be even more because you couldn't do sign language.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that just really screw you over in that world. And because Bird Box is a movie that came out at the end of this year, and just to compare those two right now, I think the difference between Bird Box, and we discussed it some in the review. In my opinion, A Quiet Place was going for more of like the Spielbergian set pieces, and Bird Box was going for more of the less outwardly like here's all the setup things and let's watch how this all unfolds in a Spielbergian way. It was more of the kind of art house version of that.
It's more focused about the character, Sandra Bullock's character.
Because it's less about giving you the layout of the land and setting up the scenario. Because I feel like A Quiet Place, you get to know kind of the geography of where they're staying at in their farmhouse property and all that.
It's trying to put you in that situation and be like, how would you survive? And get you in that headspace.
Yeah.
More so of getting you into kind of the heart and the mind of,
because
of Sandra Bullock.
Because Bird Box is more about the characters and less about, because you really didn't know the layout of any of these locations.
And not to put anybody, any sex or genre or whatever in a box, but A Quiet Place was directed by a female. And actually part of the way through, I was thinking, was this directed by a female? Because, you know,
Bird Box?
Yeah, Bird Box. It's like they could have really leaned in the genre elements, but I'm really appreciating what they're doing in this film. And I looked, yeah, it was directed by a female. You know what I mean? She didn't go towards that tendency, which it would have been very easy to do, would be to milk that for everything it's got and kind of put some of the other stuff to the side.
I think, timing is unfortunate because Bird Box is based on a book that was written in like 2014, so before A Quiet Place was made. But I think that kind of leaning into a lot of that stuff in a different way makes it where they can stand as separate movies, that you have the general concept that you can't see it, kill yourself, or it can't hear you. People link them together because of that, but the execution makes them different enough. It doesn't feel like there's a ripoff, even though neither movie ripped off the other because they both were in production and not overlapping, and it wasn't a reactionary thing. So A Quiet Place, the movie came out back in April.
I mean, Quiet Place has some great set pieces. There's not really much to complain about anything that could be cut from that film.
And that's a movie that I remember seeing opening night in a sold out theater, and people were into it big time.
Yeah, that was a really fun movie, and just that's also a kind of a crowd pleaser. We were talking about our own personal fives before we started. And there was one we me and Derek, we was a little bit busy, but it was like, oh yeah, that's the one you can recommend to everybody is looking for a horror or whatever. This Quiet Place, I think, is also too. I kind of forgot that.
Yeah.
That is definitely one you could recommend.
It's
to
a crowd
audience.
pleaser.
Bird Box, I'm surprised at the people that are into that movie as much as they are. Like, I loved it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to like everybody as much as I would a
compared
Quiet
to
Place.
like The Haunting of Hill House, because that's like a gothic horror, which not everybody's into that. And it being as successful as popular as it was, kind of surprised me at Bird Box as well. But we'll get more into that.
I think the thing with Bird Box is it showed the power of when Netflix decides to push something with their platform. Because there really wasn't much advertising
They didn't
done.
really push it.
They did. They
did not push it anywhere like they did a lot of other stuff.
Here's what I've heard.
I didn't see anything about it.
Netflix, there's been some actors or whatever that might complain like, hey, my film isn't being promoted or whatever, and they might put up a couple billboards in LA because the actors can see it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the rest of the country can't see that crap. Amazon rents out their banners, so you can like buy ad space on Amazon Prime. You can promote your film there. All this stuff. Netflix doesn't sell their stuff, but with the number of people that are using Netflix, if you put yours on the main thing, that reach does so much more than even blasting out to a lot of TV ads and stuff like that. And that's the power of Netflix is they don't have to do any promotion. When they put it up there on their thumbnail, Sandra Bullock, Bird Box, okay, I'll watch it. You know what I mean? That's so much more powerful.
When you open Netflix and it has the trailer for Bird Box auto playing, and you can just hit one button and it's automatically playing. So there's a huge power to somebody's at home. They turn on their TV, they turn on Netflix, and instead of rewatching The Office or Parks and Rec for the 1,000th time, or Arrested Development or whatever, whatever show is there, because a lot of people just rewatch TV shows, so they turn it on and then they're like, oh, this is that Sandra Bullock movie that my friend talked about.
Yeah.
Hit play. Yeah. They may not finish it, but they watch part of it. And I think that power, people started to realize, like, Netflix isn't, running TV ads.
They didn't need to spend a dime on this marketing-wise.
And they claimed that there was 45 million views of the movie in its first week, which is a huge number. If you translate to box office, if you average out to like a $10 ticket, that's a $400 million opening. Now, if it wasn't on Netflix, I don't even think a tenth of the people might have seen that opening weekend, but I still think that we've seen the power Netflix has to push their own content now. Because I think they've learned from Cloverfield Paradox, you don't have to do a Super Bowl commercial to get a lot of views.
Yeah, and we'll touch a little bit back more on the film when we wrap around to it, but when it came out, but as far as in December, and I talked about this in the podcast, my mother-in-law, like the day after it came out, she's like, did y'all see Bird Box yet?
Yeah.
I don't think she's ever said that to us about any film on Netflix ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the fact that they roped her into watching it like immediately like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not hard to see that this film was, that's one person, one sample, but I'm just saying
it reached out beyond
and all the social media stuff, and they're not on social media. You know what I mean? She doesn't have a Facebook.
All the memes.
Yeah, she doesn't have any sort of social media. She doesn't know. It's just that's what happened, and it's insane. You know, it seems like it's gonna keep giving Netflix a lot of confidence. Hopefully, to push towards some more horror centric stuff. You know what I mean?
More
Like,
genre stuff.
yeah,
that
like
they can
this
push
is,
in a way.
with that being that big.
I do think that there is somewhat of the risk of Netflix seems to not make their creators go through as many hoops with like testing the films out with audiences and stuff. So I think what you may see is more art house movies that get a lot of views, but people just really hate. Or they love 95% of it and really hate the ending.
But also, too, maybe that's good for the creators. You know,
Yeah.
the creators get to make the. I've watched half Aroma. I need to finish it.
Yeah, I need to watch that.
Really enjoying it.
Okay, let's see. So May had some movies that were big box office movies, or at least like big intended to be blockbusters. So you had like Deadpool 2, Solo. I'm sure there's other stuff.
liked Solo.
So Solo is the Han Solo origin film that was initially supposed to be directed by Lord and Miller, who had done the 21 Jump Street films. I believe Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, the first Lego movie.
Produced Spider-Man.
Produced Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse and like helped write the script.
Clone High show.
So a lot of like comedy centric stuff. And I mean, we've seen with like the Russo brothers who did the Captain America Civil War and Winter Soldier and Avengers Infinity War, they came from the comedy world, like directing Arrested Development and stuff like that, and Community. So we've seen people come from that world to go in to do big stuff. But like Solo, like a part of the way through it, they got canned by Lucasfilm because I think they were doing like a lot of improvised takes and doing a lot more humor to it than the studio wanted. And they weren't really doing what the studio wanted, so then they like removed them from the project and brought in, took a hiatus, brought in Ron Howard, and then reshot most of the movie. And then they released it within 6 months of The Last Jedi, which was kind of a controversial movie.
Well, I think too. I didn't watch this movie, but you released that movie when you're kind of already Star Wars'd out because you just had another one come out 6 months prior. And Star Wars is different than the Avengers stuff because like these aren't all building on a story. Or have something where they tie into each other. These are just movies that really have nothing to do with each other because they're so far apart.
Or they're like tying into, again, a prequel to a movie that's 40 years old.
Yeah, and again, it's like, at the end of the day, like as much as I like Han Solo, I really don't have any interest in watching somebody that's not Harrison Ford portray him. Like, I just don't.
I didn't watch it.
I think the amount of money it made showed that nobody had any interest.
I didn't make it a point. Again, it was harder for me with movies this year with a kid, but I didn't make a point to see it in theaters. But I was always curious because of the production and when Ron Howard swooped in. And then, I did the same thing. I also had just seen Star Wars before that. And was still fine with that, like having a new Star Wars. But I just watched Solo like last month or something, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I'm not saying it could be a bad movie. I have not watched it. It's just one of those things where it's like all the stuff you put into it. It's like,
me too. I was like, okay.
Well, me too, like, at the point, Julie and I both had Movie Pass. We were able to go see this just whenever before they restricted it and all that stuff. So, a movie I enjoyed, but I think, like, it being a prequel to a movie that nobody specifically really asked for.
No.
I think if they had released it more in the winter time frame, it would have done a lot better because there'd be more time to distance it from the other stuff. And
I can see this if you maybe did just watch, say, The Force Awakens and saw Harrison Ford in that, or watch the other. I haven't watched those old films in a very long time. So for me, it wasn't like I felt like I was walking in seeing somebody play Harrison Ford. You know what I mean? It was just like, this is just a character I'm seeing. I know the character, but for the most part, I was able to feel like I'm seeing this character for the first time ever. You know what I mean? Like that's why it worked for me, because I have just not revisited those films in a long time.
But apparently, you can grow 2 inches in your 30s or something because the actor that played him was a bit shorter than Harrison Ford. So let's see, Deadpool 2. I think
good.
All of us liked it. Maybe not liked it as much as the first one in some cases, but overall, enjoyable enough movie that move that character forward into like a more traditional kind of film with the more traditional 3-act structure, and wasn't just kind of the flashback origin story stuff. It still kept the stakes more grounded, which I liked. It wasn't save the planet, save the world type stuff. It was more just focused on like one character.
I think I looked back at my letterbox. So when did that come out again?
May.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think
I ended up giving that. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars
out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it, but I was just kind of like, eh.
Well, I
don't know if I felt like it was better than the first one.
I think the problem
I might like the first one better.
I think the problem with that movie, which I mean, it was one of my favorites of the year, is just that like it came out post Avengers, and I think the high from that film, regardless of what you think of it, it's one of those things where that was such a epic it's hard to.
Well, also too, if the tone of Deadpool and that stuff doesn't gel with you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you're like, that's just not my thing, really.
There was a huge. So you've got to figure like with superhero movies, people did. So you had Black Panther, Avengers: Infinity War, Deadpool 2, The Incredibles 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then you had Aquaman and Spider-Man. So you had like a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
There were is there a snake in here?
I said wasps.
Oh.
So I wasn't finished saying wasps.
Okay. Let's see. So then some other movies. I don't know if we saw these. So Gehenna, Where Death Lives.
Nope.
What Haunts Us. Hollow Child.
Revenge.
Well, I'm going to go back to these. We did
okay.
see that. Gray Matter. Mary Shelley.
I was interested in the Mary Shelley movie, but heard not great things about it.
In Darkness. Feral. Another Soul, Future World. So those are movies that were out there that I don't think anybody else saw.
But supposedly were, I guess, theatrical, maybe in some regards. I don't know. That again, I think they were covering mostly theatrical on this list. So
yeah, Revenge was a movie that had like some film festival buzz. I think like limited theatrical. And now it's on Shudder. So Derek and I both saw this. I watched it recently. The main thing I remember hearing on marketing on this was like it's the revenge film and a new twist, and it blows it away, and it's so innovative and original. And I watched, I was like, oh, it's just a revenge movie. Like
I don't want to crap on any movies. I'm trying not to do that. It's just, to me, it was a very if it was a Spice, it would be Flower type movie. Like there wasn't anything in this that was any different.
It was very stylishly done.
Stylish. It was not the style that I would. It was not a movie that I.
What is the style? Is it Grindhouse? Is it
no,
kind of 80s slick?
It's at one point she gets stabbed all the way through with the tree limb. So instead of taking care of the wound in her back, the gaping huge wound in her back, she takes a beer can, heats it up on her front stomach, and then it cauterizes the wound with the beer can symbol on it, which is impossible.
I think technically you see later she also done that to her back.
No, they never addressed it.
So
it's over the top.
It's like over the top in like one aspect, but then when it comes to the actual revenge part, it's like you're dead.
So
you're dead.
So I would
Movie's
say
over.
Well,
it costs a lot of money to get stunt coordinated.
Yeah, but
right?
it's like when with the moments that mattered, like when you're a revenge movie, like I want to see heads in blenders. I want to see like people getting cut in half. I want to see like horrific revenge, but it's like you're stabbed in the stomach, dead. No, don't give
so
me
I
that.
think when Sean asked like what the style was, so you had sub elements that had like stylized like lighting and colors, and you had kind of synthy music. So it was. I'm trying to think of contemporary movies. Like it was like a more mainstream. It's like how Mandy was so stylized.
Yeah, no, don't compare it to Mandy because it's nowhere near.
Finish.
No, but it's not, don't even deserve in the same sense.
Did you let me finish?
No.
So I'm saying if Mandy is like an art house, like hipster restaurant, then Revenge is kind of like the McDonald's version of that meal.
This is the
not even a Steak and Shake.
This is the Urban Outfitters of hipster stuff. Like it is.
I mean, so here's the thing. I'm not crapping on. I'm not like it still was an overall. If you want like a revenge film, I don't know that I needed to see another movie where a woman is sexually assaulted
on screen,
and then it's a revenge film. I mean, like. That's
why I didn't watch it.
It's not as grindhousey as like Spit on Your Grave or stuff like that, but
it's not.
A few times it stopped us because Nicole's like, I was like, I think it is some of that. She's like, I don't want to see that. And so anytime we were together, we always just pick something else because she didn't want to, and then I just never got around to it.
And again, like to me, a revenge movie is supposed to be satisfying when the revenge element happens. And on this, at no point was it like, man, that's really what they deserve.
But there was part of it like where there's like really overpowering like musical score that's more kind of synthy. So it was kind of in that vein of the kind of 80s throwback films while being a contemporary movie. And like Derek said, so there's some parts where it's kind of really over the top gore where somebody has like something impaling them. And in terms of like the main character getting herself in condition to actually fight back and stuff. But then the actual fights between her and the other characters, it's, like somebody gets shot or stabbed or...
it's like when when they die, it's not in a gruesome way. It's just like, oh, I can see that in Die Hard. Like, this isn't a revenge movie to me. Is like Last House on the Left. Like, somebody's head's supposed to go in
So
the blender.
I don't like. I
it's-
still like everybody was talking about like it was innovative. Like I'm not really sure what they were seeing because
I think it was. I guess innovative in the fact that it was directed by a female, so it's from a female's perspective, which a lot of times you.
Well,
don't
and
get
two, it
revenge
was a
movies
woman
from
that was getting revenge solely on her own without anyone else involved. There wasn't a man involved in that.
But I just look at it and it's like I didn't see anything that I haven't got out of any because I like revenge movies a lot and I watch them quite often. They come out. I didn't see anything in this that was different.
Well, like
than
it's
any
like
of the
your
movies I
John
watched.
Wicks or something, or so over the top with stuff.
Yeah. I just, I guess maybe because it's one of those movies that my expectations got put up to like a 10 out of 10 because everybody's like, this is awesome. It's got 90% in the Rotten Tomatoes, or it's in the 90s, so it's like really high up there. And you watch it, and it's like, this is just,
I would say-
pretty.
Was this an American film or was it Australian? I don't know why I felt like
I think there's some French in it.
Yeah, it's like French. It's European.
So I would say
is it
that
subtitled?
No, but it's a European director.
there's some subtitles because some of the characters speak to each other in a language not English. But
Something that like Green Room is different, but in a way, the Green Room is kind of a revenge.
I would say-
movie, but it's like the gore level in the Green Room. Now it probably had a higher budget, was like way higher than this.
well, I would say too, like looking for a comparison in terms of like what the level of gore is in some aspects.
It's very low.
It reminded me, I would say it reminded me of like the theatrical cut of The Hills Have Eyes from 2006 or 7.
It wasn't even.
It was
that
lesser than that
gory.
because there's only 4 characters in the entire movie.
Yeah, but there's no point to even like get to the level of gore in that. That this is more like
To reiterate, so the main character from The Hills Have Eyes, when he has to go after the creatures and stuff, like the amount of damage that he takes and stuff like that. Is less than that movie than this one. So it's
They're
one
not
of the-
really
like,
comparable.
Like I said, yeah, it's not really. I mean, like watching it.
Die
was-
Hard. This is like watching this is about the same gore level as Die Hard, and that's not necessarily what you go into. And hell, in Die Hard 3, they cut a man in half. So this doesn't even have like, and they stuck the guy in a plane engine. So this, I don't even know. This is just like Die Hard
it-
1 level gore.
It was one of those things where, like I said, when I watched the movie, I was like, I don't really see where the innovation is coming at here because it's like, okay, so a woman becomes the hunter after they try to kill her. I mean, I think that's been done before.
Yeah.
And like it would have been nice if it wasn't all predicated on a sexual assault occurring first.
Yeah, like, and I, had watched Atomic Blonde in the last year, and I understand that much higher budget, but you see somebody that like, actually kicks ass, then you watch this, and it's like,
So the director, given the way they handle this material, given something with a bigger budget and scope and stuff, would be interesting to see.
Yes.
But the movie itself, I thought it was okay. It wasn't
lackluster.
It just, I didn't really get where all the innovative claims were coming from.
I just expected a lot. I feel about this about the same way I felt about Mom and Dad. Like, it was something that was really talked up, and I was really excited to watch, and I watched it, and it's kind of like,
Okay, so let's see. So in June, there was Upgrade, which is the Lee Whannell movie with Logan Marshall Green, a.k.a. Lil Tom Hardy.
Yeah, that's also Revenge. Did anybody else watch that?
No, I keep meaning to. I just haven't
Yeah,
had a
I mean,
chance
it's
yet.
also Revenge, but it's not, it's high gore, not super
And it's
horror.
sci-fi,
and it's
near
sci-fi.
future.
You can kind of see the budget a little bit. It doesn't hurt the film, but it doesn't. You don't feel like you're stepping into a world like in Blade Runner or something. You know what I mean? Where you feel like, oh, this is really, and it is only set maybe. It's near future.
Isn't there no date mentioned?
Yeah, there's probably not.
Because remember Lee Whannell, the writer, was recently all those memes about like Blade Runner set in 2019.
Yeah.
So it's like we're all gonna start dressing like Blade Runner, and there's some other movie. He's like, so that's why you shouldn't put dates in your sci-fi movies because those dates will approach in 30 years, and people are like, what?
Yeah, I mean, it works
that's
because it's all, not all, but a lot of the near future stuff is stuff you could see. Like there's a sequence with a self-driving car and people are having sex in it, of course, because that's what people would probably do.
yeah.
And, and then it's like, oh no, what could happen with a self-driving car?
The only thing I remember of
because
this
it's a future movie.
I didn't watch it, but I just remember the ads that they had on Instagram at least were like, you want to upgrade? Well, upgrade from Solo. And it was like his character beating, I guess there's a fight scene in the movie, and they had like Chewbacca and one guy, and they had Solo and
That's
Lando.
funny.
So he's like beating him up. And I just remember like, man, that's when it tells you that like Solo just massively underperformed.
People
because,
didn't care about dumping on it like that.
yeah, because you would never dump on like any of the other Star Wars movies.
I mean, I enjoyed it. It's pretty cool. I think about it. I still think about it occasionally, when I'm seeing the thumbnail, because I went ahead and just bought it because I think it was either super cheap on digital, or it was only available to buy at the time or something. I don't know. Yeah, I would, if that was on again, I would watch it.
Yeah, I need to watch. I was wanting to.
I was not as high on it as some people, but hey, again, this was it was a cool release from 2018. You know, it's a cool film.
Lee Winnell was the writer that worked with James Wan on Saw and Insidious.
So, and he directed Insidious
Chapter 3.
Yeah, and that's why I was kind of interested too.
So somebody whose work I've enjoyed generally, because the first Saw, regardless of what you think, it was an interesting concept for the time. I wasn't a fan of what that did to horror for a while.
For a while.
Well, that and Hostel combined. But yeah, so... And then before we get to Hereditary, which came out in June, there was The Domestics, which is something I don't think any of us saw.
No, and I keep meaning to. It was available to rent for 99 cents the other day.
Yeah.
And I was going to rent it, and I thought, I don't know if, because once you rent it, you have 48 hours or something on Vudu. And I was like, I don't think I will actually have time just with everything I had going on to watch it. And I was like, I'm afraid. I was like, I know what's going to happen. The price is going to go back up. And I'm like, that's fine because maybe it'll be $5 to rent. Well, I went to look again. Now you can't rent it. You can only buy it.
Yeah.
But it is in Redbox for DVD at some Redboxes, but it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not hearing a lot of people talk about it. I have heard some buzz about it, but just based on the reviews that there are, them all being positive, that seems like one to check out. It's post-apocalyptic film, I believe.
Yeah. Let's see. So then the big June release, Hereditary. So, Derek, you finally got a chance to watch that, right? Because it's on Amazon Prime now.
I watched it.
So, Hereditary is something that would fall in the... So, if you're looking at, if you have a timeline, so on your left side, you have big blockbusters that entertain a general audience, and then you have art house. So, you have, A Quiet Place is on the far left side of this timeline of, it's a crowd pleaser. It's more of a general audience movie, but a lot of the people in the general audience still thought it was stupid because I've seen people say it on Facebook.
Everybody thinks everything's.
And then in the middle you have Bird Box, and then to the far right of Bird Box you have Hereditary.
No, there's way further writer stuff than Hereditary.
Well, I'm saying,
I think The Witch is. I thought you were going to say The Witch, Hereditary, and Quiet Place.
I think Hereditary and The Witch are probably pretty similar.
I guess
I
guess what I can say about Hereditary. And like I said, I'm not going to trash or dump on anything, is that at least there are gore elements and typical horror tropes in this. Mm-hmm. But to me, we talk about this is before even watching the movie. I'm just tired of watching rich white artist people do their thing and then blah, 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 and to give me something different. I'm so tired of that genre. I understand that if you're a writer and you write to what you know and whatever, but it's just well,
it is.
I've seen this similar movie so many times, and it's just the family, the blah 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 blah, and then it's give me something different. There were some horrific scenes in this movie. There's no doubt, the sign scene. And
don't spoil it.
No, and then there's some stuff.
That is on. Is that on Prime now? Yeah.
Yeah, and there is some stuff that is very horrific imagery in this that is pretty intense. But again, it's and it is pretty brutal on some of the stuff. You just kind of
towards the end, I think some people who were I don't want to put anybody down, but I think some people go in it from the viewpoint of my favorite horror movie of all time is. Well, I don't think anybody's is that. Friday the 13th reboot because people hated it who were fans of the series, but what was a huge blockbuster It. So if somebody's favorite horror movie is It, not putting that down, just kind of
it was good.
Kind of a good 4-quadrant movie that has all these elements that are enjoyable. If somebody's favorite movie and there's arguments, it wasn't horror, whatever. If somebody's favorite movie they identify as horror was It, and they don't really watch the art house stuff.
Titanic could be a horror movie, so I don't.
And they go into Hereditary. There were people who laughed by the end of it because, when some of the scenes at the end they're supposed to be horrific, with a certain character doing something to themselves, they're just laughing at.
Yeah. So what I liked about it, one, the tragedy in it, that they took the tragedy seriously, and maybe haven't had to deal with something like that, but. It at least made me think of some old tragedy, you know what I mean? And no film has ever done that before. And in the theater, I was kind of not even paying attention to the story because I was thinking about some own personal stuff. And I was like, damn, no film's ever done this to me before, And that's what I think is the success of the film. And I think I posted somebody's wall about this because somebody was talking about it. And I was like, I'll give you my perspective on it. And if that was just for me, then I would think, hey, that's maybe kind of a fluke. But I've seen it kind of trigger other people in that same way. So I think that is a success of the film. Some people it's not going to affect, obviously. And I think that that is a big thing for me on why I guess this stood out. But I also did like the mystery in the film. Yeah, I mean, it's an upper class white family. You know,
Well, it very much is the white artist who
yeah,
has this
it's-
huge
but
but at
house.
the
where I
same
get
time,
eye-rolling
but at the same time,
over it.
you can have sympathy for anybody if they've experienced tragedy like
No,
that.
it's
It
not-
doesn't
no,
matter who they
it's
are.
not about that. It's just like I think I just get very tired of the same like we're struggling artists, but yet our house is this big. It's like then how the hell do you own any of this stuff? Like you minimalize it.
Well, you're
make it
struggling with
smart.
your art. You're not struggling
Yeah.
financially, maybe, but
Yeah.
you're struggling with your art and yourself. And that's,
I think people can relate to that. But again, like when you put them in this huge house, it's like, look, Hollywood, maybe like they're going to listen to me. Quit putting rich white people like on a pedestal and make it more normal. Like I kind of zone out in those movies like soon as because you can do that like Friday 13th or whatever. But like when you start doing this, where it's like you have this big huge house and it's like not that they still can't be sympathetic characters because they can be. But it's just kind of like eye-roll inducing because it's like this has been done so many
It is
times.
something where I have over time started to, when you have a movie like Derek said, you have a family, it's typically like an upper middle class white family, and
I make butterfly photos.
and your
It's like-
main character is an artist who's struggling. So, what was the movie Devil's Candy? Was something where it's an artist. Or like, at least they're not just making everyone a writer anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think too sometimes these movies, like you said, they come from the position of write what you know. So it's writers and screenwriters making these movies where instead of a screenwriter, it's an artist, a painter, or it's a novelist or something. But the thing that makes a lot of that unrealistic is a lot of people in this day and age don't make a good living off that stuff anymore like you did 30 years ago. And the thing that's the most ridiculous to me is when people are like wealthy podcasters. It's like,
it's like, okay.
the most unrealistic thing about the Halloween remake was that some podcasters would have $3,000 on hand.
I mean, there's some that probably
Who?
Joe Rogan makes like. Have you seen his stats they released about his podcast? He has like 1.5 billion like views and listens a year.
Yeah,
It's
but
like
if you're,
insane.
but here's the thing though, those views and downloads inherently don't mean anything or pay you anything.
I'm sure he makes some money.
You make money off of selling advertisements,
which
but
I'm
nobody's are like outside of like 3 podcasters that have these artists.
Yeah, I'm just saying like if you're if a large one and it whatever. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like I'd agree with that too. But I just think like Heredity. There's a
Hereditary.
whatever. There's a scene that I think it was Chris Farley or Will Ferrell and Saturday Night Live because we just watched the scene the other day, and when like one of the horrific scenes happened, Courtney's like, "Didn't Chris Farley do that to a dog?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure that happened because it was Will Ferrell or Chris Farley. I can't even say the scene because
Oh, yes,
you know
I
what I'm talking about."
remember.
And it was just funny. That's what she picked out. She's like. And then after that, I was like, I can't take this movie seriously anymore because the entire like huge thing is from Saturday Night Live.
So I think the mystery is built well in the film. I know some people don't like the reveal, but I was engrossed in that. The acting I think is great in it.
The acting is good.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people
I like
like
the
Toni
family
Collette
dynamics.
was, Oscar worthy.
And
I don't know if she's Oscar worthy.
And two, I know the art stuff's whatever, but like for me, even just her like. Yeah, I am not making some art for a curator who is going to have a show and have the crushing weight of that. But even just like she gets the email or the text like, "Hey, just checking in," like, and like that sense of dread on her own self of like, dude, I have clients like that for videos, like just checking in. And you're like, oh my god, I have so much work. You know what I mean? Like for me, that did connect with me.
Well,
I mean, I think it connected everybody, but I think it would make it more connectable if their house was like $100,000.
But
house.
maybe
Like,
these people are making for their audience who is their friends who who all grew up in that house. And maybe that's why they're able to make maybe that's make it friends because you know what I mean. They're all well off. And it's not going to be for everybody. For me, it worked very well. It's not an enjoyable film, so it's not like something I want to keep revisiting. But I think that it was very effectively done, and I really interested to see what they're going to do next.
How I feel about this movie after watching it is like, because we went to this new place downtown and did a bourbon tasting, and it was one of those places where I feel like if you were to compare it to a wine or a bourbon, it's like, it's a trendy one that, in my opinion, does not hit any of the things that I like whatsoever. But then there's some people that like, just because it is overall like, while I do not like this movie, it is a good film. Like it is
It's
good.
made well,
It is made
acted
well.
well.
It is acted well. it is not anything because like Courtney checked out like after the dog.
It's not your taste.
It's
Yeah,
not my
no.
taste. And with
Yeah.
this, though, I do feel like I've seen a lot of like horror people push this like the best movie of the year, best movie of the year, and I feel like the only reason why is because it's a good film. Like in that you can be a good film.
What do you
and-
mean by that, though?
But what I mean by that is like there's just so much word of mouth about that. It's like people are like this. It's like there's stuff in my opinion that I think is vastly better and appeals to a larger group of people that hits more notes. Whereas this is like,
Well, I think
it's just like it's the good artsy movie. So it's like, oh yeah, this is the best of the year. But it's like, man, there's so much better.
I mean,
stuff
but
out
there's
there.
I think there's just a lot to appreciate about this film and a lot to kind of dig into.
Well, I think in it-
and it's not a 100% home run, but you have your Mandy fans who that appeals to their taste.
And I understand
which
that,
is the
yeah.
trailer,
Yeah.
the trailer park movie essentially.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
maybe
it's-
that. I'm not saying all lower income people, but we all
Yeah.
appeal to that film in some way because. He is not living in a mansion. He's
No.
living in places that we grew
Well,
up
he
in.
does get a helicopter lift to and from work. I don't get that.
but
doesn't make
but
any
then you have
sense.
people that Heredity maybe appeals towards, and then some people that are a quiet place.
Yeah.
So, let's see, July. So July had some more action movies like Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, which was amazing.
No,
Or, Fallout. Sorry,
Rogue Nation was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Mission Impossible Fallout.
I
Was
turned on
amazing.
Rogue Nation last night though. And
Yeah,
I've turned on Fallout twice this week. Once with a commentary.
Yeah. So Fallout, Mission Impossible Fallout, great movie. Is one I was glad that I saw in IMAX or not IMAX, but the big XD theater, or whatever. Ant-Man the Wasp,
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
which was just like more of a kind of a fun diversion after the more serious Avengers Infinity War.
And I
let's
didn't
see-
say anything about Mission Impossible. Fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, we talked about it
11 out of 10.
quite a bit. Yeah, it's an amazing action film. Like the story hangs together well enough because it's there, but it's all just about the visceral, like in the moment. This thing is
Seeing
happening.
a live stunt show.
Yeah, it's like how are the like Tom Cruise? Like if the president really got kidnapped in the real world,
Call
if-
Tom Cruise.
Well, depending on whether or not you want this president to be rescued,
Yeah, we wouldn't call him.
a president is kidnapped. You could probably send Tom Cruise to get him, and he could do it. he learned to fly a helicopter in a few weeks for this movie. I mean,
There's your Last Action Hero sequel.
the president's kidnapped, and like Tom Cruise.
Well, no, I'm
Nah.
just saying Tom Cruise instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger because at this point in career, all the stuff he's learned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
And then
is-
like Tom Cruise at the
True
end,
Lies is what I
He
meant.
saves
True
the
Lies.
he saves the president, and the president has like ADHD medication or something. He smacks it out of his hand like, "You will not take medication for mental health." Let's see. So there's also some movies we did not see: Bleeding Steel, Sunset Society, Path of Blood. Some ones that I saw. So the first Purge and Unfriended Dark Web. The first Purge was the initial Purge movie that was, before even the Ethan Hawke one. This is about the origin of the Purge.
I'm purged out.
I'm not sure how the timeline, all that stuff hangs together, but it's set more like, I think like near future or present day or something. Assuming like the first Purge occurring, it happened really targeted at low income areas. And it shows how they manipulated things behind the scenes to make sure that it actually was a success and actually went through and people actually killed people. And a lot of the reviews for like this movie's reverse racist because it makes these old white people are trying to kill the minorities. And it's like, I mean, I guess if you see those reverse racist, like
Maybe you're.
because there are white characters in the movie that aren't bad. But I mean, it's mostly just about how the ultra wealthy want to control the country better and want to, subjugate the poor even more. So creating a night where it's mostly them who are the ones that suffer. So is it like it was the social aspect, but the social commentary kind of gave way to B movie thrills.
Yeah.
And they weren't anything over the top. There were some cool elements in it, like there's reasons that people like different colored eyes if you watch the trailers and stuff. And like there's masks and stuff like that. But I thought like ultimately this wasn't a better pure like thrill a minute type movie than Purge Anarchy or Election Year. Because those were just better like pure action
Anarchy,
films.
the second one.
Yeah.
That was like the
Frank
Punisher.
Grillo one.
Yeah, that was like the Punisher, the Purge.
So I thought that those were maybe a little bit more fun just in a visceral sense. This movie still had some fun elements in it, and it wasn't a complete disaster or anything. It was still like not significantly worse than the other ones. It's just like, well, I mean, I don't really know where they go. There's the TV series on USA that none of us have watched. Not a bad movie, not a terrible movie. Just one I saw with Movie Pass. I probably wouldn't have seen of my own accord based on the reviews and stuff if I didn't have that. and what was the other one? Unfriended Dark Web. More reality based than the first Unfriended. It's not really so much there's a ghost on Facebook that causes people to kill themselves or something. This is more of somebody finds a laptop and then they get roped into the dark web of somebody watching what they're doing at the laptop and all these elaborate things going on. It's still told completely from a computer screen, which is something that may disqualify for some people. I don't think that type of presentation is inherently like something that makes me not watch a movie, but it does give me a little bit less threshold to kind of continue on if something's really not doing it for me. Another movie I saw because I had Movie Pass. It was, I don't know if it was probably about equal to the first one. Wasn't terrible. I think the novelty of the kind of laptop screen is worn out a little bit compared to the first one, maybe. None of the characters were all that interesting, and some of the subplots I wasn't all that invested in. And then too, something where there was two different endings. Depending on where you saw it, you got one of the two different endings.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I don't think they're vastly different. Just different levels of nihilistic, kind of. But
and this one, he's wearing a red shirt. This one, he's wearing a blue shirt.
Different.
well, it's like in one movie, a character kind of gets taken out quickly, and another one, it's this kind of like darkly comedic thing. Not a movie that I thought was like a must watch, just more of like a check it out on streaming. Something where people in the theater, it's one of those things where I'm not sure people in the theater who went to see it knew what it was, because some people's reactions to it.
That's why I love the theatrical experience, is to see people blindsided by stuff.
The weird thing was still the one time I went to see the Blair Witch, whatever it was called, in 2016, the new reboot. And this family with like 8 people and like 5 kids. And it was a family that didn't appear to speak English. And I was like, is this the movie you want to see? I mean, you have like 5 kids with you of like ages like 4 to 12. Like, is this? And then they left 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
in.
not the movie.
So, but yeah, so nothing that's like it's not like a worst or anything. Some people put on their top 10. To me, that would be a stretch. I mean, but for individuals, if it floats your boat, that's fine. To me, it's just like, oh, okay, I didn't hate seeing this. I only saw it because I had Movie Pass. At this point, I really only recommend somebody watch it on streaming service. I really wouldn't recommend renting it outright, because I just didn't think there's enough there. Let's see, in August, most of these are movies that none of us saw. Slender Man, Bloodfest, The Meg, and one called Boarding School. Bloodfest was kind of the people go to a big haunted house amusement park deal, and there's somebody there actually killing people. Looked kind of interesting.
There
But
were
we
some
didn't see
people
it.
that seemed to like that film as for, theatrically released slasher.
Yeah, did get some positive word of mouth.
And I was going to try to watch it. So what's today's date? Like the 5th or 6th?
6th of January.
I think it's available to rent like in a couple days. Right now you can only buy it digitally. So another I was going to maybe try to get to, but sorry Bloodfest.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about you next year.
Let's see. Some movies that came out in September. Most of these are ones we didn't see either. So there was Hellfest, which was something similar to Bloodfest, I think. Just like a
Hellfest.
lower budget kind
Instead
of.
of blood, it was hell.
Or wait, Hellfest is the one I'm thinking of, right?
Or wait a minute, which one is
Hellfest
which?
is the one that's set in the amusement park.
Let me look. Because no, I think
Yes.
you're right. I'm getting these confused because I think they're both similar ideas. Yeah, so Hellfest was the CBS Films one that was the theatrical release that had trailers and stuff and did make like a little over 10 million or something. And then Bloodfest was the more independent one that was festivals and like VOD and stuff. So that's what that was. But in September, so you had A House with a Clock in Its Walls, which is Eli Roth movie that had Jack Black.
Second
and,
film that came out this year of his.
Yeah, and so,
People seem to like that. It's kids' horror film, basically.
and then The Nun, none of us watched. I was going to rent it.
Yeah,
but
I kept trying to watch it because on Amazon to rent the HD is like $5.
It was $5.99. I was like, do I
Yeah.
want to spend $6?
I
on
really
The
wanted to
Nun?
watch it because it's one of those movies where you see the Rotten Tomatoes score and you throw that out. Now the audience score was bad, but it performed really good at the box
nobody liked it,
office.
but a lot of people saw it.
yeah, and a lot of people saw
Well,
it.
it
So
had
it's like
so people liked generally The Conjuring 1 and 2, and they generally liked like the Annabelle creation,
Yeah.
like the sequel. So then I think this one just had the word of mouth of those Conjuring movies, and it was like, oh, it's a scary nun.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I think it got hyped up because of the nun was in the other movie. So I really want to watch it. I
Because
am
the
gonna
nun
watch it
sequence
soon.
was one of the best parts of
Yeah.
Conjuring 2.
which was a late addition to that film.
Yeah.
So it's something that we will probably talk about at some point when one of us watches it. Just the word of mouth from people who also have similar taste to me weren't big on it. And there was just so much stuff going on. So I want to
Yeah,
spend time doing
I
that.
saw a lot of people piling on that film on Twitter.
Let's-
Normally a lot of these films, I'll say, hey, some people really like that. I saw basically no defenders of this film.
made a lot of
People said that
For what it
like
was.
yeah. So the Predator, which was
got dumped all over.
That was a movie like we all saw. We had an episode.
I did
on
not
it.
see it.
Or yeah, you didn't see it. We had an
didn't see
episode on.
Oh,
it.
you haven't seen The Predator yet?
It's one of those movies where I keep trying to watch it, and like
Yeah.
every time I go to sit down, it's like I had to get up at.
So
4
I
in the
was
morning,
somebody
like,
that throughout like our podcast or whatever leading up, so after the trailers and the promo materials and stuff leading up to the movie's premiere, I was kind of defending. I was like, well, don't crap on it just because there's going to be comedy or humor. There was a kid in it.
I mean, there was in the other movies.
I was like saying if it was The Nice Guys with a Predator in it, I'm in. That's amazing. But the movie we got really wasn't that, and it felt like a victim of test screening, reshoots, and editing.
Yeah, you really don't know what if the studio meddled and that caused some faults and kind
Because
of.
Fred Decker, the writer of it, had talked some about how things were taken away out of their control and changed and shifted around, and apparently they reshot the entire ending, and that's why there's some characters that just kind of disappear, and things work out the way they do.
And also the poor decisions of Shane Black of
having his friend in it that was a sex predator.
yeah, and not
Whether or not it's true, like what that guy had told him it occurred and played it off like it was a misunderstanding.
yeah,
But still,
and
knowing
then not telling any of your crew and having been a scene with Olivia Munn, like not a good look,
not
man.
cool, man.
Yeah, in this era especially, you gotta be a little more forthright. That's like, hey, look, this guy's in the movie in the scene with you, but here's what he did.
It's every era, but now especially you should be even, if maybe you weren't aware before of being sensitive, now you should be aware. Like people are being vocal
Yeah.
about this stuff, and ignorance is not as much of an excuse now as it used to be.
Yeah, especially when some dude's trying to nail his like 13 or 14-year-old like cousin or niece
Yeah.
or something. And then of course, like the movie that we will have more to talk about, and I'm assuming the next episode too, is Mandy, the Nick Cage movie that everybody was talking about. They got a lot of buzz, for the visuals, the performances, the music, what it did. I mean, and two, so Mandy's a movie that I think there's probably a pretty big divide in how much it was enjoyed by someone. If somebody's like a film fan that's into the kind of out there stuff, and they're, because a lot of people might hear, oh, it's a revenge film and Nick Cage and it's all this cool stuff. I'll watch it because like our dad would probably not enjoy this film. If somebody's
if you
favorite,
started it halfway through the film, he would.
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. If somebody's favorite film was, for instance, Con Air, and they go and pick this up, they might not make it through the first 30 minutes because there's a lot of out there imagery.
I started watching this late at night the first time because I just went ahead and bought it because it wasn't for rent. It was only to buy. And I thought, people are loving this. I'm just going to buy it. And because of that, I was able to be more lax. But I started watching the first night and started falling asleep. But it was like very late at night.
Yeah.
I liked the film. That's not saying I didn't like the film at all. But the first part of that film, it just really takes its time
It's a long
to
movie.
set you into that world.
And then like the people have complained like if the story is obscure, like it's not really that hard to follow. It's a pretty standard revenge
Yeah.
story once it gets into it and you look at it just linear in terms of what happened. It's just that setup stuff is a lot more esoteric and obscure. And it's not John Wick.
yeah, it doesn't get to the point.
It doesn't
right
get to
away.
the point very quickly. It has a lot of kind of almost acid trip like imagery, and a character, there's drugs involved, so a character's like talking kind of like straight to you from the perspective of another character, and there's a lot of like lighting and colors and
I
music.
mean, it's a very bizarre movie. I'll get more into it in our next podcast. But again, this is a movie that, like, I guess if, like, you all know my taste very well, and probably a lot of people who do listen to podcasts, I wouldn't expect myself to like it. But there's so much weird stuff in it. And especially the last half of the movie, like, it's just so... there's so much Nick Cage stuff in it that it's awesome. And
Yeah.
and I think that to me is like you're waiting on that, and this is where some like Revenge. I'll compare it because they're both revenge movies. Revenge and Mandy, like the one thing is like the revenge in this stuff was like actually satisfying, whereas in
Snowflake!
Revenge, yeah, like you get Snowflake. This is my favorite shirt. My favorite shirt. And he snaps a
And
neck.
Cheddar Goblin.
Yeah, and you got cheddar. There's so much weird stuff. And whereas like Revenge, like when it came down, it's just like, oh, pew.
Well, a difference too is Mandy seems like a movie that didn't take itself too seriously because there's almost the self-reflexive like Cheddar Goblin type stuff.
Yeah.
In it. So that
Well, then he literally calls somebody a snowflake and throws him down
if
a
it
well.
was if
so
it felt deathly serious, then it might make it almost insufferable to watch.
Yeah.
To the first part.
It was very bizarre, but this is a movie I feel like most people could probably watch. Like, oh, okay, I get. Not that anybody. I understand this is a highly divisive movie, but we're kind of talking about Hereditary, whatever. Hereditary. And you know, whereas that movie's like you said, that's like a fine wine. And this is like the $20 like bourbon you buy, or like just a beer. This is Bud Light, you know. I don't know if I say
But
Bud
it's not
Light.
stupid. But it's also not stupid.
I would
I'm
say-
not saying it's stupid. It's just more grounded, maybe, than
Yeah.
Hereditary. As far as
In
when I
some
say
elements.
grounded, when I say grounded, I don't mean realism.
Yeah.
I mean
What
like
the
you
people
said,
do. Like
just,
Nicolas Cage is a lumberjack,
not taking
and,
himself too seriously.
Yeah, and his
And I would
girl,
say I'm trying
Mandy
to
is
think
like works at
if
a
we're
gas
talking
station.
about like Hereditary is like a boutique bourbon or like something like that. This is more of like the bourbon and Coke mixture that company makes or something.
Yeah, I mean it's very good, but I could see where it's divisive. I guess because like Courtney didn't like this at all. Like she thought I was ridiculous. Especially there's like a full frontal male nude scene, which Revenge also has. And she's
Yeah,
like,
Revenge,
I'm out.
for one thing, I forgot to one thing in Revenge is
You can see penises.
It does have it has more, I think,
Male
actual
nudity.
male nudity than female nudity because female nudity shows like buttocks.
Yeah.
And then like
Well, there's an
like
entire
side boob that's like
there's-
lit from the side where you can't really see
Yeah.
anything. But the dude's dong
but
is
did you
out.
pause it to make sure?
Yes. No, but like the main guy in Revenge, you see his dongle. There's like an entire scene at the end that's
Well,
like
the entire last 15 minutes or 10 minutes, he's
penis
naked.
everywhere.
So
Yeah,
schlongs.
Mandy. The film would not be what it is without the first half of that film.
No, and
and I
it's needed.
love the Nick Cage kind of. There's a single shot, one take thing of his transformation of emotions after a lot of this stuff happens that is so great in Bathroom. But and as much as I think this film to be what it is, and I don't want it to be anything different, I never would say I want to change it. You know what I mean? Like I think this film is a gift to 2018, but. The first half of it stops me from rewatching it a lot. If it was
Because
just the
it's
second
long.
half,
It's
I
really
would
long.
put it on more if
Yeah.
it was the second half and kind of got to the point. But I don't need it to be that. I don't want it to be any different than it is at the same time, even though this isn't, you
And
know.
I just feel like anybody who loves like 80s metal, like off the wall kind of stuff would like love this because this just feels like a big long music video. And
Well, it
I
also
love
kind of feels like a lot of those metal album covers from the 80s
Yeah, they
got
kinda-
made into a movie.
Yeah.
Let's see. So that was Mandy. So then October.
Real quick though, I didn't talk about Predator as far as my thoughts at all on that because I don't know what that's probably gonna be nominated for anything. I don't think, right?
Nah,
I mean, I didn't see it.
Yeah,
so.
I mean that's a
And I'm a
maybe-
Predator
maybe
homer.
sequel,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just was like, I didn't hate it. I thought it was fine enough. I'm totally happy I saw it in theaters because not that I'm like mad that I went to see that film or anything like that. It's totally fine. I would have I was hoping for more from Shane Black though and Fred Decker. And I don't know if we'll get a different cut of this film or whatever. But also some of it comes down to not having a lead as strong as Schwarzenegger.
Is the Predator franchise dead?
At this point, I think it's for a while.
Box office wise,
Yeah. Because what's more dead, this or Aliens? Because I think they're both pretty dead, and I don't.
Well, because Alien's been like the Aliens franchise, they've been teasing something coming up, so maybe like a new game or series or something.
Well,
they said that
the
one
games
with,
doesnn't count. I'm talking about as
with
far as
Amanda
being,
Ripley.
Yeah.
as far as theater.
I don't know,
release.
but
I think Alien's a universe that feels a little bit less tarnished because there's been, well, I don't know.
There's been more good.
and I think more opportunities. I think at Predator now, I don't know where you go with this if you don't want to make a sequel to this because of the box office. Like, I think maybe you put Predator. I think Predator's the one to sit on the back burner for a little while longer
Till the right
versus
person.
Alien. Yeah,
'Cause Alien-
if they don't want to move forward with the
Because-
Shane Black
I guess I
sequel.
will say this. I mean, it's inarguable that the Alien franchise, which there's also more Alien movies, but the Alien franchise has had more successful movies than Predator. Because to be honest, as much as I love the Predator franchise, you've only had one good Predator movie, and that was the original.
Well, because none
And
of
like I enjoy Predator 2, it just was not. As
I didn't
successful.
mind the third one.
What was the third one?
Predators.
Oh yeah, that was
yeah, I
good.
like that
Yeah,
one.
but I would say, but you know, Alien, you had like Alien 1 and 2, which are good,
Yeah.
and then you know you
So-
have 3, and then
I
one-
like
Yeah,
I
but-
like 3
but,
and
like,
4.
3 is a divisive
I mean, I
movie.
pretty much
Yeah.
like all
box
those.
office wise with like the Predator. So the original Predator was a moneymaker. The sequel wasn't as much. I mean, like I think overall with video and all that stuff included, it would have made its money back. But it was not enough of a success because it took over 10 years for another one to come out. So we're excluding the Aliens vs Predator movies.
Yeah,
because
those-
are their
yeah,
own
those are
beast.
And also
trash.
too, like I would,
because like
do I want Predator franchise to be dead? I would take another one. Like, yeah, let me see what you're gonna do with it next. But
I just think it.
I don't
needs
know
to-
what all there
you
is
know-
to gain from seeing it again.
Yeah,
but at the same time, yeah, I think Alien is in a better spot.
I
than
guess
Predator
my
is after
question
this
too
movie.
is was it a huge mistake of theirs to not get Schwarzenegger involved at any
I
point
think they
on
tried.
this?
They tried.
So apparently they had him like a smaller role that would have played out in the last third of the movie.
Yeah.
But whatever it was, when Schwarzenegger read it, he didn't think it was enough meat on the bone to do it.
Yeah.
So turned it down.
So
And
maybe he saw the movie as bad and was like,
well,
yeah.
I think
mean-
that like if he had been like a focal point of the movie from the first frame, if he was involved in it in that way,
Yeah,
then that would have been a
I think
far
this
different
film would have heavily benefited from somebody like The Rock, or some face that is
somebody's extremely charismatic.
That
because
is-
hell, even hear me out, John Cena, like somebody that's a
Yeah.
big, imposing. Because like you need, I think that's what made Predator
somebody that
successful.
brings their own personality to the
Yeah.
film. That's what I think would have.
But instead, they went in the direction of having a ragtag group of former
Yeah.
soldiers.
Which I mean, it was just to be fair, kind of what every Predator movie's ever done. But you again, like you need, I think, for my opinion, for Predator to work, and I need to watch this one and see my feelings on it. But just the first formula worked: big, muscular, charismatic, like over the top guy.
Well, in the jungle.
In the jungle, but wherever. But I think in order for that to work, you need a Dwayne Johnson, or like I like John Cena. Some of the stuff he's done, he's been really good. John Cena. You find one of these guys like that, and then you get them.
I like the team in this, but I don't know if it was the editing or what, but it wasn't maximized, and I'm
and stuff
I'm not
just
saying what a film
happens.
should be or whatever. I'm saying the lead in this, he was fine, but the team wasn't strong enough to make up. I think the team there was a failing there with the dynamic and the feel of the team. Even though I liked those individuals and moments of it, it just felt like they had cut some stuff out, or it just wasn't built up enough in the film that we got.
All right, so yeah, now I can move on to October stuff. And stuff we did not see. So there's a movie called Ride. Was that the rideshare movie?
Maybe, yeah, I think so.
Not related to our short film. I Still See You and Malicious, which we didn't see. So the big October horror thing, because Suspiria was November. It was like November 2nd or something.
Oh, that's right.
The big October movie was Halloween. The return of Jamie Lee Curtis, David Gordon Green directing. Direct sequel to the 1978 Halloween, ignoring all of those other sequels. Laurie and Michael were not related. We've talked about that movie. We had the episode about it. Since we talked some about like hearing people break down the script for it, looking at some of what the alternate endings were. A movie that made like $254 million worldwide, so way more than anybody probably thought going into the year. Because, unadjusted for inflation, it's the highest grossing movie in that series by far. Adjusted for inflation, it's the number 2 grossing. Because just the first one, when you adjust for inflation, ended up being like a higher grossing movie. So a movie that, very successful for Blumhouse, like a $10 million budget. Something that made way more money than like the recent reboots of Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, like globally or domestically. So it just, a slasher movie that did huge box office. But I think that success is limited to that type of movie. Like, I don't think other movies could come out and have that same box office with a similar setup being a slasher, because they don't have Jamie Lee Curtis. They don't have the mythology around the series. They don't have a character that everyone recognizes. Like, there may be more slashers that come out in the future. And I think studios will probably take the wrong lesson, but I think this is an event movie. Very similar to how Halloween H2O was an event movie, 20 years ago. So I don't think that's an easily replicated success. And you know, it's a movie where a lot of people have generally said, "Oh, we like it," but there's problems. I
Yeah,
mean,
so-
any slasher you're going to have inadequacies in
so
some way.
where I lean on this is, you know, it's very much a cousin film to Predator, you know, based on like, a lot of expectations, a history and everything of an older franchise. For me, you know, I walked away from the film. I enjoyed the theatrical experience, but I was a little disappointed, a little bored at times in the film. Was disappointed based on just how much I love the work of David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and a lot of other stuff they've done. Vice Principal season 2, I think, is phenomenal. But this feels, I like this a little bit better than Predator. This is where this lands for me. Got some good stuff in there.
Say much though.
I didn't hate
yeah.
Predator. I didn't hate Predator though.
like-
Predator's not that bad at
where-
all.
where I
and this
feel-
is not bad either,
Like-
but it's just very much like, if somebody puts it on, I'll watch it again. I may grab it to see some behind the scenes, but I heard there's no commentary and stuff, so I'm like,
We're
dude,
waiting for the better
So like, I would have
version.
loved to hear a commentary to maybe make myself like the film more, but there's not. So it's like, dude,
Well, I guess the only way I can accurately describe anything about this movie is spoilers for like the next 30 seconds to a minute. So if you haven't watched it, skip 30 seconds to a minute. Start now. Like, they didn't have a definitive ending. Laurie did not die. Michael did not die definitively. So at this point in the movie,
Well, they didn't show it.
but he's alive. So unless if you show his dead body and he is lifeless, then he is alive. That's how these movies work, and that's how they've always worked. So there was not a definitive death on either side, because either one of them could have died. She could die before she gets to the hospital. So, but because they did not have the gumption to give a definitive ending to it, then that is where, to me, the movie just kind of fell apart, because I don't want to see Laurie Strode v. Michael Myers for the whatever time we're getting into, the 6th time now. So, or more, whatever. I don't even know. It's been so many times. It's like, so that's where the movie was very good to me until the end. And it's like, man, you all got to this and you just didn't have it. You did not have enough cojones to like do something regardless they loved it or hated it.
Okay, and then so I think we should stop talking about spoilers now, because it's been about an hour and a half, or a minute and a half, and maybe we can for the next one we can say, hey, this is gonna be spoilers for the next few minutes.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think too, though, just the entire idea that they're talking about a sequel to it kind of tells you something. I
Yeah,
mean,
and that's what ruined it for me.
but I mean, here's the thing: like with these types of movies, I would have liked it if they had just said, "We're only ever going to make. There's no more Halloween films." But the problem with franchise filmmaking in general is a studio or a property owner is never going to let something lie dormant that they can make money from. They're going to run it into the ground.
Yeah, but like what I kind of liked about, what was the guy that directed the Haunting of Hill House?
Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan said the story's done. I'm done
Well,
with it.
that's a little
I'm
bit
not-
different.
No, it's not, because that was probably arguably more successful and positively reviewed than Halloween.
But
So you
also
have-
too, maybe Netflix let him do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because they let
But
more control.
I
But
just think it's a rare thing in this day and age to have something that is so good and so you really captured something to just do that. Now we'll see in the long run what actually happens, but I just think with Halloween, with the franchises and all that kind of stuff, it's like I get it, but then again, to me, it lessens.
then you're like, what's the point?
What's
You
the
know,
point
what's
of
the
this?
point,
Yeah, I
man?
just because Halloween
We're
more
just gonna
so
do this dance. It's just
Yeah.
like it's like a sports season. Like, okay, next year's rolling around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's just see.
Well, I mean, I think
nobody's gonna die. We're just gonna see who, maybe comes out on top this
Well, I mean,
time.
Yeah. And that's where it gets kind of like, it's just kind of like the old Looney Tunes where the
Yeah.
coyote and the sheepdog would fight for the entire time. At the end of the day, they clock out like, see you later, Ralph.
I think-
See you later,
But
Jim.
also,
And that's those movies.
But
I'm
also,
tired
this
of it.
movie wasn't a lot of them boxing. You know what I
No.
mean? It was just
And
like,
it might have been more enjoyable though.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I think too, though, that some of it too, like I think they did deliver what in terms of just looking at the movie,
What
in
you
terms
expected.
in terms of what the movie ended up being and how like it's structured and acted and paced and edited. The second best film in the series, probably.
Yeah.
Because it's not better than the original. People can argue if they like H2O or H2 more, or Halloween 2. Like you could argue those points, but I think most people say it's probably the second best film in the series. I enjoyed it way more than the Rob Zombie remakes.
Are you
because-
including part 3?
No, because part 3 is not like it's not Michael Myers. I don't think you can compare those. I mean, it's in the series, but only in so much that it has a name. But like, I don't really compare those really. And I think most people now kind of separate that out. I would rather seen a remake or a takeoff of Halloween 3, but Yeah, I mean, I think we did get the best sequel we've had in that series in a very long time, but it just wasn't. I don't think it really exceeded that sequel-itis. And two, the first movie worked because of the time and place and just the feel of it.
I mean,
if you rewatch that first one, there's a lot of continuity errors.
I guess at the end of this movie, like, it wasn't bad. And
it
that's
had some good moments.
But really, all I can say out of the movie is like they didn't screw it up. I mean, I feel like when I come out of a movie and I say, well, at least they didn't screw it up. That's like, man, you kind of did.
That's the
like
lowest bar to get over.
But at the same time, they did the rare thing of, like, in those recent horror series, like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, when they've had those new movies, people hated them. Like,
yeah, but
they made money, but the fans hated it so much they haven't made sequels.
For me, where it lands, I don't even know. I mean, yeah, first time I watched 2, I was like, oh yeah, I like this a lot. I don't know how, some of it's slow and whatever. And yeah, this is maybe a little bit slicker and stuff, but for me, and maybe it's easier to give some of those older ones a pass, this is so disappointing that I probably even would kind of enjoy H2O better than this one.
Well, I don't know about that.
I personally, because I just feel like it works better as a story, even though it's so super 90s and super dated. I just felt like, I don't know. I feel like it was more of a success on a lot of fronts.
And at least until they retconned it, had a definitive ending.
Exactly.
And now they retconned it, but that movie at the end had a definitive ending.
And that matters so much, and that's why this film just...
So does H2O get lessened by the fact that Resurrection exists and undid it?
I haven't really watched Resurrection. No, I don't. No, I'm talking about individual films.
Yeah, just individually, I think...
See, I'm somebody where, like, if you... it's hard for me to separate out, like, canonically, like, this is a sequel that undoes it. Then to me, it's
I just look at the individual films when I'm watching it, because I don't even watch this stuff in order. You know what I mean? I jump around like 1, 2. Before I would have said 2 was better than this new one. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe this new one at least moves faster. I love Jamie Lee Curtis in it. She's great.
Yeah, she's great.
She should have been in it more.
Yep.
She should. There's
a lot of things
I don't care about passing the torch. I don't care about. No,
that's not what I was wanting.
I want to see Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie.
I would like to see a breakdown in terms of screen time if she was in this more H2O.
Or
Halloween 2.
Well, like my thing is that this movie,
just the logic of this was, and I'm not one that gets talking about logic, but it's like the whole thing was supposed to be her preparing, and then she was like
not
really
prepared.
stupid and make dumb stuff, and it's like, what do you even like? You can tell a lot of thought. Not as much thought went into the script as I thought was going to go into it.
Hey, he might be in the house, so I have this shotgun here that is very good in close quarters. I'm going to grab this single shot rifle to go and why would you do that?
The door, it's just so they just took out all the wind of this film in that last act.
I think that a lot of it is you set up this final confrontation, and it's just if she was really prepared if she was really as much a survivalist and as prepared as you might think, the confrontation will last maybe 2 minutes.
But that would be, how much more satisfying that would be?
But
that would be so much more satisfying.
You could figure out something. You know what I mean? You could figure out something. I guess they came up with the ending afterwards and reshot that, and they didn't really, they were like, oh, this is kind of a setup. Like, we didn't think about, there's just...
They didn't go back and...
There was no setup. There was no great setups and payoffs and everything. It was just kind of went along. Jamie Lee Curtis was great. She carried a lot of that movie. Everybody else was fine too, but her character was interesting. Yeah, she was way more fun than she was in H2O. They made her, a little crazy and paranoid, and that was great, but they didn't milk it, and it was very all superficial and just it rested on the laurels of the formula, which would have been fine, but they didn't milk the formula for all it was worth.
Like I said, though, to me, I'm different than your general audience, obviously, but if the final confrontation had lasted 10 minutes, I'd be like, fuck yeah, because that, to me, again, that you just don't see that. I think you don't see that.
The problem with a lot of stuff is if you, not that you, it's like a genre movie, but if you stretch it out, because in real life, if Michael is really as vicious as he's shown to be and as strong, an actual confrontation between him and Lori that doesn't involve her using weapons against him from a distance, it would last not very long. And then
you
if it's
figure
her
out a third factor for drama, though, the family's in danger, or, you know what I mean? There's something you can write whatever. It's just what they wrote was not very satisfying.
I think another thing that kind of creates a little bit different expectation is when it's actually a real movie again, then you're not comparing it against slasher sequels. You're comparing it against all movies. Because some of those sequels do feel like they're so ingrained in the franchise. Like if you're reviewing Halloween 4, you're not reviewing Halloween 4 against the best movie of 1989.
No,
I mean,
I think
to be
that-
fair though, mostly I do. That's why I don't like most of the Halloween movies.
But
You know what I mean?
But I think you have a good point because like where this movie, I'm not just comparing this to other horror movies. I'm comparing this to everything I've watched.
Yeah, me
So
too.
Halloween Resurrection did not really like it's.
I'm not
called-
grading this on a curve.
yeah,
I was gonna say,
yeah, this
like-
movie it was done. It to me it's just like Heredity. Like
Hereditary.
oh god, whatever. I can't get it right. Hereditary. It's like the movie is good enough that it no longer gets graded on a curve. I grade it compared to everything else,
Yeah.
and then it just falls
Yeah.
short because it's like okay, well,
Yes, I think-
I've watched other movies this year that have more suspense and drama to
So,
them, and are
Like if you get like The Guest is a movie that was kind of like an homage to Halloween.
yeah.
The Guest had an ending that was about as final as this movie's.
But it was more
But
satisfying.
it all felt like
in a
it
way.
worked together.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was just.
So if you compare like Halloween 2018 to The Guest, and like I said, The Guest has a lot of homage to Halloween, like Halloween 3.
But the difference is that Halloween has 40 years of baggage with
Yeah.
it. Whereas The Guest has, if you didn't
And
like
all
it,
all the characters have dialogue.
Yeah.
And you build up the stuff. So we'll talk more about that later. So then just I think what we'll do is we'll finish up the remainder of like the theatrical stuff from 2018, and then the next episode will cover like all the streaming and our awards and stuff. So November, the two big releases for horror were Suspiria and Overlord. And Derek, you have yet to see Suspiria, right?
No, I've purchased it and it is not available for streaming yet. I'll get to watch it, mid-month.
So maybe we do Overlord first. Overlord was the World War II Bad Robot production. For a while, people thought it was a Cloverfield sequel,
thank
kind of
God
like
it
10
wasn't.
Cloverfield Lane. I mean, it still theoretically could be because those movies don't have to tie together very much.
Yeah, but this was so much better than.
Would the movie
anything
have done better at the
Cloverfield
box office if it was called Cloverfield
Well,
D-Day or
the,
something?
The problem with Cloverfield though is like Paradox was so not
if
good.
it was called Cloverfield Overlord, but like Cloverfield Paradox, which
Then I wanna watch
do we even
it.
talk about? Yeah, we haven't talked about the
because
streaming.
we haven't streamed
Yeah,
it.
but my
Yeah.
thing is, I wouldn't have watched it if it had anything to do with that wretched franchise. At this point, I wouldn't have watched.
So
it.
Cloverfield Paradox was just like
No, we're not even talking. We were talking about Overlord. Overlord was really good. I understand. Like we kind
it
of
was
talked about.
Castle Wolfenstein the movie, essentially.
Essentially, I mean, it wasn't as off the wall as that.
Based
but,
on the original game, not the sequels.
But it was really good, and I mean, it was one of my favorites of the year. I loved it.
It was just really under advertised.
yeah,
and undersold.
It was under advertised, and again, it was one of those kind of weird releases where like. It was kind of it was before the because
It was before all the Christmas stuff.
yeah, it's before the
and
Christmas stuff, and then it's before like
It's post October.
it was a weird time.
So it came out before like Spider-Verse and Bumblebee and Aquaman and the kind of like the blockbuster Christmas time frame movies.
but it also came out against like the Grinch and
well, the same target market, really.
no. But again, like when you come out with something against like that because it was kind of a dead period because you just
It
came
was
off
kind
the
of
high-
programming. They just
Yeah.
really should have pushed it a lot more. Because if you came out in October, it's competing against Halloween. But I think if you come out before Halloween, because it's a movie that's set in World War II where the soldiers run into a supernatural element and they have to fight stuff and there's action and
two.
gore.
So the goal, they have a clear goal in the film. It's to
Yes,
go
there's
to
a
this
military goal.
tower, right? Tower.
Destroy communications.
Destroy
tower
communications. So
before D-Day.
so they can storm Normandy.
So they lay out a clear goal that's a military objective that in and of itself could be an interesting film. And then you layer in this genre aspect that comes in at times. So you get kind of gnarly gore in it and
Some pretty good
and action.
villains.
Yeah.
And it's not schlock. It's not overly done schlock. It's kind of grounded-ish action where you get some characters where you kind of actually do like them and care about them to some extent when you're kind of finding this stuff out. So just a movie I thought that they really should have marketed
more.
or I'm not sure. I mean, like, I'm not a marketing person. I'm sure they did a lot, but it just seems like a few things fall differently. The movie's $100 million grosser.
Yeah.
Yeah, push it to the.
And I just really
to late
hope
winter, like
Because with as many
2019.
people will watch the undead elements of Game of Thrones and love it, And like, not saying that they're the same thing in the movies at all. I'm just saying like people watch these properties that have elements that are genre too, and they're fine, and they are loved. So I just think if they had pushed it to the right people in the right way, that it could have made a lot
Think
more
about
money.
if this was on Netflix on that banner,
Yeah,
and they
this
showed a
would-
little teaser,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, what's this movie? Oh,
Yeah.
and yeah, it doesn't have Sandra Bullock in it, but if it got a lot more people talking.
It does have it has charismatic leads. It has interesting characters. It has a strong female character. It has everything you want in a movie, and they could have went into worse areas, but it didn't. It straddled that line of being like, because when you get thinking too much into who the creatures could be, they never got into that. It was more soldiers, so I think that was a good place they went in. I just think it did to me. It did everything it needed to do. It just kind of came out in a weird time and was maybe under.
I think
pushed.
too, like the advertising for it should have. I mean, it did show that there was some stuff going on.
But what I liked about this movie is
Should have been a second wave of like
Yeah.
marketing push of like, hey, we're going to reveal more of what this is and the tone of this film. And you know what? Honestly, as much as, people disdain it, they should have maybe afterwards released a trailer that was set to more of an upbeat music, because even though it didn't have some poppy song in it, that's kind of the feel of this movie.
Well, didn't
this
some of the
rah-rah feel.
advertisements have AC/DC over
Did
it?
they? Okay.
Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
It just feels like it was a missed opportunity, because I think the movie came in a lot bigger than it was.
And it was a good
And we all
movie.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it had decent Rotten Tomato score.
Yeah, we said this during the podcast for the film. I don't think there was any fat on this film. It was so well paced. You could put it on and it just starts and it goes. And, it's satisfying.
So the last
Doesn't leave you thinking though. There's not much. It is
but
what it
something-
is.
yeah.
It is what it is. But it's a great ride. It's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
awesome roller coaster.
So the last movie discussed before the next episode, where we wrap all this up, Suspiria. So that was the 2018 reimagining of Suspiria.
Luca. Oh my gosh, I've been listening to some podcasts and
The director of Call Me by Your Name,
and
right?
now I can't think of how it's pronounced. And I think about it all the time because like that's how you pronounce it.
So like, I think this will fall at the end. I think when you compare like taste, I think this falls in a similar camp to Hereditary, in terms of sensibilities really clicking with the material. Because I saw this at our, the local theater that's more of like the art house theater that has more of the independent movies. So I think the crowd going into those movies at that theater probably are more aware of what they're watching than like a multiplex or something like that. But it did seem like there's a lot of parts where there wasn't reaction, or people are kind of like, ugh. Because I think it's, an art house film. The original Suspiria was a much more straightforward movie, I think. And it was like, the Argento style, where you have all like the super colorized imagery and the blood that's super bright red and the stained glass windows and
that
all the
really
colors.
weird like running scene at the very beginning where you see the woman run through the woods, and it just there's a lot of stuff I like in the original.
And you have the
I've not seen the remake.
and you have the original has that very iconic score that runs throughout quite a bit, that you should definitely come away of when you finish that movie hearing the score in your head because you heard it so much, which is not a bad thing. I enjoyed the score. And Goblin and all that stuff have been touring with the movie recently, the original. But the remake is much more muted, or the redo is like much more muted, much different music style. Like the core idea is the same, but everything else is different. Even though some of the character names and stuff are the same. It just feels
I
like
was surprised at how much was the same actually, but it's very much expanded upon, but it doesn't feel stretched to the point where it's like, hey, sometimes films feel like they're stretching things to give reason, like, hey, let's just explain more.
Well, instead of being about ballet, it's about dance, and this movie actually shows a fair deal of dancing and had like real choreographers work on it and stuff. So a lot of that is more focused on.
Man, there's some good dance scenes in this film though that are some of my favorite moments of the year. But
and there's some gore in it. There's one scene in particular that's incredibly gruesome and just made people flinch when watching it. The ending of the movie is kind of crazy. I would say it's far more crazy than the original.
the original blew me away though when I saw the ending of that film.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe at the time, the different ending, but the original, I guess, because the reveal and everything. But they don't hide what it's about because like everybody knows, and they kind of the original, they bring it up, but you really don't know what film you're getting in that original when you first start watching it. People know now, so they're not hiding that fact. And like I said, about expanding things, some remakes maybe over-explain stuff, and you feel like, oh, they're just explaining stuff because they want to feel like they want to add more. Yeah. And it doesn't really add more. It's just explaining stuff. You don't need to explain it. Even though they're building out the characters more and maybe explaining things more, it is there for thematic reasons and story purposes. And it's not there just because they feel like they need to think of something new. He thought of something he wanted to take from this and really spin it out and do something that really, I guess, honored the spirit of the original. And even, it was set where the original was made, and kind of a little bit about the politics of the time of that place. And they really thought a lot about this film, and I absolutely loved it.
I think the biggest diversion from the original to this one is the addition of the character of Klimper.
Which you really didn't gel with him being at it, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you have a psychiatrist or psychoanalyst or whatever who is like an old man, like in his, 80s or 90s, who's a survivor of the Holocaust and all that, and, World War II, because he's in Germany in the late 70s, and it ties into the political and news items that happened at that time, and it just feels like the Klimper character was kind of a window into that world. But to me, it just felt kind of like a showy performance that was kind of because they did. Not necessarily.
So it goes back to the Jeff Goldblum thing. Just because you could doesn't mean you should.
I'm trying to think of examples. So because I was talking to somebody about like Tropic Thunder and like how it's not politically correct now and it probably wouldn't fly. But the entire point was it pointed out like the Robert Downey Jr. character, actors going so far out of their way just to try to get an award or to have some performance that proves their mettle. Especially characters playing mentally handicapped characters, like Ben Stiller in that movie is Simple Jack.
Yeah.
Which was really just like a takedown of like the Sean Penns of the world that did I Am Sam and all these people that did movies that seemingly are motivated just to get awards.
Radio and
so I felt like the Klimper performance in Suspiria was kind of like that, in that it was a really showpiece thing. I don't begrudge anybody involved with it for doing it. Just to me, it was kind of took me out of it.
I know what you're talking about, and it just reminds me of like Eddie Murphy and the Clumps or whatever. So it's like
I for one enjoyed it, and everybody's gonna feel differently about it.
I've not watched the movie yet. But
I for one enjoyed that element of it, and I liked it. But I liked almost I don't want to say ridiculousness of it, but I just like that. I don't know why. I just love like, hey, go for it. Make something different and a little bit weird. And I like that part of it. And I totally get that some people will not.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it didn't ruin the movie for me or anything. I was just like, this added a good 35, 40 minutes to the runtime.
What was Tom Cruise's character
a lot of that film, I remember that story. And I think about those moments and kind of the emotional aspect and that person tied into kind of another element of thematically what that film is hitting on. By the end of the film, you realize, okay, this is why, because this was important story, important to the story actually. And
I get what they're doing too with having it, having all these strong elements about femininity and women and having all these female leads and stuff. But it was written and directed by men. So
I don't even mean that. I don't mean that in that element. I'm talking about kind of the story element of guilt. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I get what they were doing and they added that element in. To me, it's just like when you watch the movie. So this isn't even spoiling. If you watch the movie and you see the character of Klimper, there's no way you don't think that's someone under heavy makeup. Like there's so many because what was it? The Zack Snyder Watchmen. Mm-hmm. The old person makeup in that is just, and the Nixon makeup, laughably bad now. I mean,
well, isn't it kind of like, what was it, Prometheus with the guy that...
with...
Again, it's a different flavor. It's a different thing. Just Pierce. Like Nick Cage talks about how he, his acting performance and his style. He is not going for realism. He is going for something else to draw, like the vaudeville actors. There's some films that's, what was it? There's another film that basically is putting on a performance of, I guess, a Roman... something that was I guess set during the Roman era, but they do it out on a platform in the middle of a busy street with cars going by. Like, I think there's a self-awareness to it, and it is kind of part of the show. It may not work for everybody, but I appreciate that element of it that makes it stand out that much more. And again, I understand not for everybody, but
yeah, because some people like I've seen where that also took them out of the experience some, and some where they bought into it. But yeah, I mean, like Suspiria is a movie that was pretty controversial. It was made on a budget of estimated like $20 million. I think box office it made like 4 or something.
But it's an Amazon film too.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think
they're knowing, hey, this is gonna
it's
be
limited
free on their streaming
limited release.
at some
Pretty
point.
much all that theatrical release for is literally Oscar bait, and that was probably it. Because there's no way they thought that they were going to release this movie and make a profit.
20 million off of a very small release because they slowly rolled
Because I would
out,
say that it was.
I think it was just Oscar.
Yeah.
bait
it was
or
even
war
like
bait.
a movie that's a little bit more difficult to connect with than Hereditary or The Witch or some of these like more kind of art
You
house.
think it was
horror.
more harder to connect to than The Witch for some people?
Yeah, because I think if you show a trailer,
interesting.
if you show a trailer for The Witch, is there's a witch in like New England back in the like 1800s or 1700s,
around the time of the Salem stuff.
you know,
So
like Salem
okay.
witch trial era witch story. People can go in, and that's a concept that can sell them on it, even if so they go in, and that's why people who saw it and were upset because they wanted it to me, I guess, more like the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow or something.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you show a trailer for Suspiria, it's like, so it's in the late 1970s in Germany. There's a dance troupe, and there may be witches. People are like, I don't know.
Okay, so you're talking about just getting people into seats.
I'm saying
I
like
thought
the
you meant
concept.
once. I thought you meant once somebody actually saw the film, easier for them to digest. I
I
feel
don't
like
know. I think that The Witch was easier to digest than Suspiria because The Witch is pretty straightforward.
yeah.
And Hereditary,
I feel like this is a little bit. I don't know. I feel like this had more of a broader appeal than The Witch, but maybe not. Maybe again, that was
Well,
just my.
I don't think it. Again, I've not seen the movie. I think if
Yeah.
it did, it would have got a wider theatrical release. So I think the fact that
Yeah,
it didn't.
yeah.
is-
I'm not saying I'm
I
defending.
think
on
they
that.
knew what
It's
they
serious.
had, and they did like limited theatrical rollout.
and
and
that
then
doesn't
pushed
mean
it on
anything
streaming.
bad because as much as I love Mandy, it was limited too. They
Yeah, I mean,
they only released it once it did well on
I
streaming.
mean, a lot of
so.
movies, if you just recognize what it is and then push it in that way, you can have it reach mass success. Because
Yes.
Hereditary, the way they marketed it, it made over 40 million. So they did a good job pushing that movie out to
more
the
than
right
that.
people. I mean, worldwide, I'm sure.
Yeah,
it
that's
did.
what matters now because like doing the domestic stuff, the worldwide.
China. Well, China doesn't like supernatural.
No, but the worldwide now because like Aquaman is making a ton of money because of worldwide.
But yeah, just so Suspiria is a movie that like they're
America's in the tank, William.
Yeah.
We you don't even bank on America because going to the movies anymore. We can't afford it.
Well,
yeah, unless it was like Avengers, then they're going to go see Avengers.
the U.S. We went from being the largest, most important theatrical channel in the world within 10 years to now kind of playing second fiddle
Because
to
we
China.
only have 300 million people.
But China,
380.
the problem with China
Yeah, billion.
is they restrict the amount of movies they allow in from foreign countries. They sometimes require, like, was it Iron Man 3 had the entire Chinese subplot that wasn't in the American version. They cast, like, Chinese actors in American movies for no real reason aside from just to have them in there. They'll shoot stuff in China for no real reason other than to get co-financing or to make it easier to release there. And then in China, they don't allow certain content. So there's been movies that have been edited for the Chinese release.
Hey, though, but it's sometimes it's like you want to get your movie made at all. You got to make, you know what I mean? Like
You want to make $1 billion on an
yeah,
Aquaman
or
movie?
you want to get financing. So
Because like The Dark Knight, they have a scene that takes place in China, and like wasn't that purely just to get Chinese?
I didn't know
involvement?
that.
Well, like when he goes and gets the
I didn't know that was for purely.
I mean, I don't know that it was. I'm just saying a lot of movies it brings into question like, was this solely to do this specific marketing aspect?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Suspiria is a movie I'll be interested to see Derek when he listens to it or watches it, but not a mass appeal movie, but one of the movies that's been a lot talked about.
Yeah, I fully expect to be ready for any sort of impression from Derek from liking it quite a bit to absolutely hating it. You know what I mean? Like I understand like this film may turn up people off. I absolutely loved it.
It's a movie where after I watched it, people ask me, "Oh, should I see it?" It's like I don't know.
Well, like I said, I really love the original, and I remember like when I first got Netflix in like 2008 or 9, like that was one of the movies I wanted to watch. It was really hard to track down, and I finally got it, and I was really impressed.
Well, the
with
Suspiria, Argento in general has a following with a lot of U.S. fan base, but it's not a mass market thing at all. It's film fans, not really the average person that walks into Walmart doesn't say, "Oh yeah, Dario Argento, I love Suspiria." It's more, you know,
you never see that movie on sale at Walmart.
yeah. I mean, maybe. I mean, like, I don't want to discount people who shop anywhere. I'm just saying, like, it's not a movie that the average person just knows about. But
It's
yeah,
not Halloween.
yeah. So that'll wrap up our discussion of like the big theatrical releases from 2018. So the next episode,
And even if some we may have missed,
Yeah.
maybe we just saw in streaming because it was limited. You know,
Yeah.
we'll talk about a couple extra.
so the next episode, we'll start off with going through the stuff that was on the streaming and then giving out our awards and opinions and kind of just a little bit of a look forward to 2019. So that'll be in the next episode. So the part 2 of our 2018 wrap up. So do us a huge favor, leave a review on iTunes to help other people find the podcast. We always love seeing comments and feedback on YouTube and social media and things like that. You know, if you enjoy the podcast, like telling us that you enjoy it or things like that, it's always awesome to see. Because a lot of times you do get bogged down in all the work it takes to do some of this stuff. Because even though we don't edit the podcast down as much as some do, like going through and taking out any ums, ands, buts, cutting out the space, like it still takes, you know, a few hours each week in addition to recording it, watching stuff to prep, doing a little bit of research, editing it afterwards. Like there is a lot of effort into it. So we always enjoy seeing feedback from people. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff, like it's hard to sometimes get feedback. You see like people download it, but do they listen to it? Like we see like the download things only shows you if it's downloaded. There's no way to know if somebody actually listened. Now on YouTube, you get views. I can see like the amount of minutes that were watched of the video. Because was it one of our old podcasts, like on Maximum Overdrive, has a lot of views recently and a lot of downvotes because I think people thought it was the full movie or something, and just got upset at whatever it was because it was just our podcast.
Because it's probably the length of the movie.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, this is terrible. I hate this." And then there's like 20 thumbs down.
There's
to
no
4
Green
up.
Goblin here.
So I think it's just people don't realize what it is. But yeah, so
we got a nice comment last week about somebody feeling less lonely because they had the
yeah, so
podcast
always,
listeners.
yeah, always,
So
always
yeah,
love
we
seeing
really
stuff like
appreciate
that.
Yeah,
we're always
glad
glad
we can.
if anybody connects what we're doing. Yeah, so it's always awesome to hear. So you know,
We're getting close to our 200th episode. Also,
yeah,
we may have a little hiatus in between the next one and that because Derek will be off.
He'll be getting married and going on vacation.
He's going to get financing in China for a
Yeah.
film. So
an X-Men movie. I'm not.
so we're gonna be making Chinese X-Men #2. Yeah, so find all the work we're doing at houseofavstore.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all that stuff. And to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MetaWorldDerek.
and I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll bring this episode of the House by VSR podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video